Chapter 51. It was a moonlit night, and the wind was strong. Within Windstream Tribe's mudstone city, the moaning sound of the wind whistled past. It was as if there was resentment within the wind, lifting up the dust on the ground and causing the moon in the sky to seem a little blurry. Several figures sped through the mudstone city in the middle of the night. They seemed to be searching for something, but in the end, they were still at a loss. Only when the sky turned white in the distance did these people slowly disperse. Bailing walked back to Dark Mountain Tribe's lodgings with an exhausted and pale face. That night, he had lost a large amount of blood at the center of his brows, and his body was almost at its weakest. He had also witnessed the short but shocking battle with his own eyes. The spear that flew through the sky and earth, causing the earth to tremble, and Wu Sen's mad roars constantly echoed in Bei Ling's ears. In Bei Ling's eyes, Wu Sun was Windstream Tribe's prodigy. Even if both of them were at the 6th level, Bei Ling knew that he could not win against Wu's senator. In fact, he did not dare to fight him. Wu Sun did not practice any normal berserker method. The statue of the god of berserkers he worshipped in the past was said to be one of the most mysterious statues in Windstream Tribe. He needed to practice it with the aura of corpses and gather his berserker blood to turn into a corpse. If he mastered it, he would be invulnerable even if a mountain collapsed and the earth collapsed. Then who was the person who fought against Wu Sr.? I can't tell his level of cultivation, but if he could make Wu Sun look so pathetic, then he must be famous. Could it be Black Mountain Tribe? Bei Ling's face was dejected. He was the strongest among his peers in Dark Mountain Tribe, but he knew that once he left Dark Mountain Tribe, he was nothing. Bei Ling returned to his lodgings, to his room, with complicated emotions and the confusion he felt towards the test in the morning. He pushed the door open and walked in, but the moment he stepped in, Bei Ling's entire body trembled. His pupils shrank, and all the hairs on his body stood up. He sucked in a breath, and shock and disbelief appeared on his face. There was a blob of fresh blood floating on the table in his room. That blood was glowing with a faint green light. It flashed and looked incredibly strange. That blood was Bei Ling's blood essence, which was forced out of his body when Wu Sun tapped the center of his brows. Bei Ling was stunned for a moment before he turned around abruptly to look behind him. It was pitch black behind him. It was quiet all around him. His heart pounded against his chest. After a moment of silence, he immediately walked into the room and stared at the familiar blood on the table. His expression kept changing. Who is he? Why is he helping me? After a long while, Bei Ling grabbed the blood. The moment Bei Ling touched it, it immediately fused into his body and turned into a wave of heat, causing Bei Ling to quickly sit down cross-legged and activate his blood. At the same time, in another room within Dark Mountain Tribe's lodgings, Su Ming sat cross-legged on the floor. His face was pale, and there was blood at the corner of his mouth. However, his eyes were extremely bright. He lowered his head to look at the dark green blood in his palm and revealed a cold smile. So this is the pride of Windstream Tribe. He doesn't allow anyone to suppress him. He can only stand at the top. It's not a big deal. If I can complete the 3rd burning of my blood, then even if I can't kill him with this spear, it won't be difficult for me to injure him. Su Ming lifted his hand and wiped away the blood at the corner of his mouth. There was a fierce glint in his eyes. I'm only lightly injured. I just need to circulate my chi to recover. But the berserker art this person practices is really strange. In Su Ming's mind, the image of the burning corpses and the green flames coming from them appeared. If I have the chance, I'd like to meet all the pride of God, but judging by how crazy Wu Sun was in the underground cave, this thing must be really important to him. Su Ming cast a glance at the dark green blood in his hand and placed it into a small bottle. Then, after some thought, he lifted his hand and seized the air. A ray of moonlight appeared and surrounded the small bottle before disappearing. Su Ming put the small bottle into his bosom and closed his eyes. He circulated the chi in his body and waited for morning to arrive. Time passed by. Very soon, the sky outside was no longer dark. As the white light in the sky grew brighter, morning arrived. The morning of this day was different from the rest. That was why Windstream Tribe hosted the test that was held once every few years. All the small tribes in the area participated in the test. Every single test was not only a test for the younger berserkers, it was also a chance for all the tribes to showcase their future. Whether there were any outstanding berserkers in the tribe would determine the attitude of Windstream Tribe when the sun sets. When morning arrived, Lei Chun, Wu La, and Bei Ling left their lodgings under the lead of the elder, the head of the guards, and Shan Hen, together with the guide from Windstream Tribe. Su Ming stood outside the house and watched the group leave. He saw Lei Chun waving at him with confidence on his face. He saw Wu La's calm gaze that had a hint of disdain in her eyes. He saw Bei Ling, who was silent and whose expression had returned to normal, but did not even look at him. He also saw the elder, who was smiling and nodding with a profound look on his face. He also saw the head of the guards, who had a look of pity on his face. Finally, Su Ming saw the quiet Shan Hen sweep his gaze across Su Ming's body with a strange glint in his narrowed eyes before he left. When these people disappeared into the distance and gradually disappeared from sight, Su Ming continued standing there. However, his body was slowly changing, and so was his face. After a moment, Su Ming turned into a strong young man. His skin was slightly dark, and there was a valiant presence exuding from his body. He was no different from a normal berserker. However, the current Su Ming was different from the previous night. The bamboo hat that the elder had given him and fused into his body was incredibly mysterious. He could change his form at will. Su Ming did not panic as he stood there. Instead, he looked at the sky and waited calmly. He knew that today was important to him, and it was equally important to the elder. Perhaps Su Ming would be able to fly into the sky today, or perhaps he would fall into the abyss. Su Ming did not know whether there was a force that was interfering with the lives of the people and controlling their destinies. He looked at the sky. It was very blue, and the end of the blue sky could not be seen. Among all the living beings on the land, who among them can see the end of the sky? These were the first few sentences in the Beast's Skin book. When Su Ming first saw it, he had been deeply moved by it, and he had also been confused by it. People often use the word under the sky. What is under the sky? If the sky has a spirit, then it will turn into oppression, oppressing the berserkers, wanting to make them humiliate themselves. The words appeared in Su Ming's head. Sometimes he felt that the sky really did have a spirit. However, this spirit was too cold. If it was not cold, then why would there be prodigies among the people Su Ming saw? Some who were quiet and ordinary, some who were as unparalleled as the elder, but had a head full of white, and some who transcended like the man in purple robes who stood above everyone else. There were the complicated emotions in Bei Ling's heart, and Wu Sun stealing his power. The might of the sky will turn into an invisible form. Bear the pressure and endure it, fusing it with joy. If you are not happy, then you will rise against the will of the heavens. This was the last sentence in the first few sentences of the Beast's Skin book. Su Ming still did not understand it. Even now, he only understood a little. He had once asked the elder about it, and the elder's answer was still fresh in his memory. This sentence is very simple, but it is also very complicated. The simple meaning is that the heavens are pressing down on us, forcing us berserkers to either submit to Liu Yu and accept it, or go against the heavens in anger. But the last sentence is a question. From what I understand, perhaps this question is whether there are other ways to fight against the heavens besides going against the will of the heavens. When you grow up, perhaps you will be able to understand it deeply. If one day you can reach the state where you can say this sentence, perhaps you will be able to think of a third way besides obeying and going against the will of the heavens. After all, this Beast Skin book is the last place I went to in my life. It is the largest holy land of the Berserker tribe that I have ever seen in my life. That place is called the Great Yu. The owner of this Beast Skin book is the elder of the Great Yu tribe. Su Ming remained silent. He continued looking at the blue sky. After a long while, footsteps came from outside. A person was slowly approaching them. Su Ming averted his gaze from the sky and looked over. He wore a white robe and had a head full of white hair. His face was old, but there was a hint of wisdom within it. It was Shihai. Shihai looked at Su Ming, at the unfamiliar face before him. He did not know why the elder, Jing Nan, had arranged for him to come to this place and bring a person to participate in the test in secret. Come with me. Shihai could not see anything strange about Su Ming. Once he finished speaking, he turned around and walked towards the back. Su Ming's expression was calm as he followed behind him. The moment he walked out of the door, Shihai waved his arm. Immediately, a layer of fog spread out from his body and enveloped Su Ming in an instant. Su Ming's heart jumped, but he did not retreat. He allowed the fog to sweep him up and rise into the sky with Shihai. They turned into a fog arc and charged into the distance. This was the second time Su Ming looked at the ground from the sky. He was still a little nervous. Shihai saw his nervousness but did not bother about it. Instead, he increased his speed. Before long, he brought Su Ming past Windstream Tribe on the ground and headed towards the vast plains in the north. Su Ming looked at the vast plains before him. From the sky, it looked like the sea on the ground. There was no end to it. Yet as the fog rushed towards him, after a moment, Su Ming felt his body tremble. It was as if his body had crashed into an invisible barrier. The moment he passed through it, the world around him twisted. Ripples appeared on the surface of the water, and Shihai's cold voice traveled into his ears. "We're here." This was no longer a flat plain. There was a mountain right before him. Su Ming had never seen such a huge mountain before. It was much taller than Dark Mountain. Compared to it, Dark Mountain was like a baby, and the mountain was like an iron tower. It looked as if it could pierce through the clouds. He could not see the peak of the mountain. He could only see half of it. It was surrounded by clouds and fog. The size of the mountain was unbelievable. On the mountain, Su Ming could vaguely see an endless amount of stairs leading up the mountain before disappearing into the fog. At the foot of the mountain was a huge circular field. There were 9 majestic statues standing around the field. Each of the statues exuded a primal and savage aura, making them look ferocious. At that moment, there were already hundreds of people on the giant field. They were spread out, and there was a buzz of discussion. Su Ming's arrival instantly attracted the attention of the hundreds of people on the field. But most of them only took a glance at him before averting their gazes. No one knew what they were discussing. Chapter 52. Su Ming did not see the elder and the others looking at him. Most of the berserkers here were from Windstream Tribe. It was as if he had arrived before the elder and the others, even though he had left later. Once Shihai placed Su Ming down, he handed him a black plate. Without a word, he immediately turned into white mist and left. Su Ming stood alone and looked around. There was no familiar face around him. He could not help but remain silent. He lowered his head and looked at the black plate in his hands. There was a Berserker tribe number on it. It was 109. The black plate looked normal. It was carved out of a stone, yet when he held it in his hands, it felt cold. I heard that the test this time has the highest number of people. There are around 100 people. It's only around 100 people. This is just the first stage. There must be a lot of people who won't participate in the second and third stages. After all, if they're not strong enough, they'll just be humiliating themselves. That's where you're wrong. There are 3 stages in the test, and the first stage is the hardest. The second stage is speed, and the third stage is actual combat. These 2 stages require a certain level of cultivation and also involve luck. There's a pattern to it. But this stage doesn't seem to have a requirement for cultivation, but in truth, this stage is a test of determination and potential. This can't be faked, but it's also very cruel. No matter what level of cultivation you have, if you don't get a good ranking in the first stage, then it means that you don't have enough determination and potential. The tribe won't pay too much attention to people like this. Su Ming lowered his head and toyed with the black stone plate. He could hear the discussions of the people in the area. But speaking of which, the top 50 berserkers in every test are mostly berserkers from Windstream Tribe. The other tribes are just subsidiary tribes. I heard that no outsider has ever appeared in the top 10. Of course, it'll be the same this time. There are only so many people in the top 10, and even the top 40. It's especially so for the top 10. Besides the outstanding berserkers in the tribe, There won't be anyone else in the top 10. As Su Ming listened, he gradually heard similar discussions. Not all the people in the area were going to participate in the first stage. Most of them were just there to watch. As he listened, his mind was still thinking about the 6 numbers the elder had mentioned. Suddenly, Su Ming seemed to have noticed something. He lifted his head and looked to his side. There was an old man approaching him quietly. When he noticed Su Ming looking over, the old man quickly smiled and took a few quick steps towards Su Ming. The old man wore beast skins and had bone earrings on his ears. By the looks of it, he should be a member of Windstream tribe. Little brother, I am Bei Qiong. I saw that you are also one of the participants of the first stage, so I came over to chat with you. I don't have any ill intentions. The old man's appearance was slightly comical, with a protruding mouth and monkey cheeks. When he smiled, his facial features seemed to move, leaving a deep impression on people. Su Ming's expression remained the same. Once he heard the old man's words, he nodded slightly. Little brother, I'm a straightforward person. Don't mind me. My level of cultivation may not be high, but I've lived for a long time, and I've trained my eyes. I see that your potential is very normal. The old man blinked. The test is held once every few years. I always come to watch. With your potential, it'll be difficult for you to get into the top 50. Based on my experience, you should be able to get into the top 100, but the old man took a few steps closer to Su Ming with a mysterious look on his face. He first looked around, and when he saw that no one was paying attention to him, he quickly spoke in a low voice. But you're lucky that you ran into me. I have an herb here that can make a person's potential burst forth within a short period of time. With that, you might be able to get into the top 50 if you join the first stage. If you buy more and eat them at the same time, it's not impossible for you to get into the top 10. The old man spoke in a low voice and opened his robe slightly. He quickly revealed some of the herbs inside, then quickly covered them up. The mysterious look on his face became even stronger, as if he was afraid that too many people would see it. Su Ming was momentarily stunned. He looked at the old man and found himself speechless for a long time. You don't believe me? When the old man saw Su Ming's expression, he immediately spoke again in a low voice. Lad, you're still too young. Even if it's fake, you still have to try it. After all, once your ranking increases, it'll be completely different in your tribe. By the looks of it, you won't be able to do well in your tribe either. Alright, if your herb is really effective, then why is it that Windstream tribe has always been the ones to get into the top 50 during the test, and no outsiders have ever gotten into the top 10? I won't buy it. Hurry up and sell it to someone else. Su Ming frowned and took a few steps back. The old man widened his eyes and raised his right hand towards Su Ming. He gave him a thumbs up and praised him. Brilliant. Lad, you're really brilliant. You managed to think of this so quickly. Looks like I was wrong about you. You may not be talented, but you're very smart. But lad, you're wrong this time. It's not like no outsider has ever gotten into the top 10 of the first stage. 50 years ago, there was a person who managed to get into the top 10 of the first stage. You should have heard of this person before. It's the elder of Dark Mountain Tribe, Mo Sang. Do you know how he got there? It's because he bought a lot of my herbs every single time. And that person from the Black Mountain Tribe also bought my herbs and got into the 40s. And that person from the Dark Dragon Tribe also got into the 40s. Hey, don't go. I'm talking to you. During the last test, there was a lad called Bei Ling who got into the top 50. He bought it. The old man continued talking, making Su Ming frown and retreat once again. Lad, we're fated to meet. That's why I'm selling it to you. If it was anyone else, I wouldn't sell it to them even if they begged me. My herbs cost 10 stone coins to others, but I'm selling them to you for only 3 stone coins. How about it? I'll sell them to you for 3 stone coins. How about it? I'll sell them to you for 3 stone coins. It's so cheap. Wow, it's such a cheap herb. If I yell, a group of people will immediately surround us. Since we're fated to meet, I'll buy 1 and get 1 free. The old man continued talking, and his spittle flew everywhere. As he spoke, he clapped his hands, as if he was excited by his own words. Su Ming was stunned, and instinctively took a few steps back. Just as the old man was about to continue, the crowd in the square suddenly burst into an uproar. The sky distorted, and a huge black python suddenly burrowed in. There were a few people standing on the python, and they were the elders group. It's Dark Mountain Tribe. They're the elder of Dark Mountain Tribe. I heard that his power is incredibly high. It's a pity that there's no one in the tribe who can take over his position. But I heard that there's a member of the younger generation called Beiling. He was ranked 49th in the previous test. The dark python disappeared. The elder and his group landed in a corner of the field. They cast a glance at Su Ming from afar before averting their gazes. Beiling stood there with a proud and aloof look on his face. Lei Chun and Wu La, on the other hand, looked around excitedly. See that old man and that cold-faced boy? They're the elder of Dark Mountain Tribe, Mo Sang and Beiling I told you about before. The old man beside Su Ming quickly spoke, his face still as mysterious as ever. As he spoke, an uproar broke out in the crowd once again. This time, it was clearly louder than before. As the square in front of them distorted, 5 people slowly walked in. The person in front was wearing a black robe and had no hair. It was the bald young man from last night. Wu's senator, his face was dark, and there was a faint hint of anger. It was obvious that what happened last night was a great humiliation to him, especially the dark green blood that belonged to him. It made him anxious, but he did not show any of it on his face. The 4 people behind him were also silent as they followed Wu Sun into the field. Wu Sun, he's the one who will definitely get into the top 3 in Windstream Tribe's test. I heard that the Berserker art he's practicing is incredibly strange. Quiet down, this person is temperamental. All of you shut up. As Wu Sun moved forward, he suddenly let out a low growl. Immediately, the area around them became silent. Wu Sun walked past Su Ming with a dark face. Yet the moment he walked past him, he turned his head and looked at Su Ming coldly. There was a hint of uncertainty in his eyes. Yet after taking a closer look, he realized that this was not the person he met. He let out a cold humph and walked over. He sat down cross-legged in the distance. The 4 people who followed him surrounded him as if they were protecting him. Su Ming looked at Wu Sun, then at Beiling, who was standing in the distance, before averting his gaze. This Wu Sun practices the art of devouring blood with the aura of corpses. He worships an evil statue from Windstream Tribe. He's filled with hostility and has a dark personality. He's not a good person. The old man beside Su Ming seemed to be angry, but he was afraid that Wu Sun would hear him. He mumbled under his breath. By the looks of it, he must have suffered a loss when he failed to sell the art of devouring blood to Wu Sr. I say, lad, don't provoke this person. But even if you do, it's fine. I have another herb here. I guarantee that once you eat it, you'll become incredibly strong. The old man thought about it and started trying to persuade Su Ming again. Su Ming frowned. He felt that the old man's nagging had far surpassed Lei Chen's. In fact, if Lei Chen was compared to this person, he could be described as a man of few words. The old man continued trying to persuade Su Ming, as if he would not let his guard down if Su Ming did not buy one. At that moment, the area outside the field suddenly distorted once again. This time, a dozen people rushed in. These people chatted and laughed as if they were stars surrounding the moon. The person in the middle was not tall and was slightly plump. He was laughing and chatting with the people beside him. Sometimes, he would even wave his hand as if he was gesturing something. There was an indescribable presence about him. It was extremely obvious among the dozen people. It made all those who saw him focus their attention on him the moment they saw him. Chun Chong, Wu Sun, who was sitting cross-legged in the distance, opened his eyes and stared at the slightly plump person. He narrowed his eyes. Su Ming's gaze was also focused on the person. He could clearly feel the faint presence within the person's body. It was not the power of qi, but an indescribable feeling. Chun Chong, this is the lad that everyone in Windstream Tribe knows. He's a good person. He's much stronger than that Wu Sun, the old man quickly whispered by the side. I'll tell you, but don't tell anyone else. This Chun Chong is a big customer of mine. He often comes to buy herbs from me. Chapter 53. Before long, a lot of people from other tribes other than Dark Mountain Tribe arrived. These people either came with their tribes or came alone. Gradually, the number of people in the field increased. Sounds of discussion could be heard among the crowd. It was very lively. After all, this kind of grand ceremony only happened once every few years. The number of people this time was much higher than in previous years. Su Ming took advantage of the fact that there were a lot of people around and quickly walked into the crowd to avoid the old man who refused to let go of him. The old man's torrent of words gave Su Ming a headache. Once he avoided him, he saw the old man looking around through the crowd. He quickly lowered his body, not wanting to be seen by the old man. There may be a lot of people there, but Su Ming did not recognize any of them. He looked very normal when he stood in the crowd. No one would pay too much attention to him. He looked very normal. In truth, it was not just Su Ming. Besides the people from Windstream tribe, there were many other candidates from other tribes in the crowd. It was also the first time for many of them. Look, that's Wu's son. I heard he's a prodigy from Windstream tribe. Isn't that Chinchon? His name is well known. I've heard of him before, but this is the first time I've seen him. I didn't expect him to be like this, but he sure has an imposing presence. Did you see Bei Ling from Dark Mountain tribe? I heard that he's not an ordinary person. He got into the top 50 during the previous test. If we can make friends with him, it'll be good for us. When we go back to the tribe, we'll be the envy of many. The people around Su Ming, who were also first-timers, started discussing among themselves. Most of them looked envious. This might be our chance. If Wu's son or Chun Chong takes a fancy to us and chooses to follow them, then our place in the tribe will be different. Hey, there are quite a lot of people who have the same idea. Don't you see that there are a lot of people around them who want to talk to them? Why don't he try as well? Lad, you're alone here. This must be your first time here as well, right? There was a young man with an honest face standing by Su Ming's side, and he smiled at him. Su Ming smiled politely and chatted with the young man for a while. Brother, not all the people are here yet, but it looks like the first stage is about to start. Why don't we go to Chinchon's place and talk to him? What about you guys? Let's go together. Or else, if we're alone, they might ignore us. The young man quickly said and tried to persuade Su Ming and the people beside him. Look at that Wu Sin's gloomy expression. He must be in a bad mood. Let's not provoke him. This Chinchon looks very straightforward. He should be easy to get along with. The young man's words moved the surrounding people. In the end, 7 or 8 people walked toward where Chinchon was. Su Ming originally did not want to go, but when he was dragged along by the enthusiastic young man, he followed the crowd. Just as they moved forward, the space outside the square distorted again, attracting everyone's attention. As the space distorted, 5 people walked in. The leader of the 5 was a burly man who looked to be in his 40s. He was dressed in coarse-hem clothes and looked extremely muscular. There was a shocking feeling of qi and blood circulating around his body. There was a distinct scar on his face that extended diagonally from his left eyebrow to the right corner of his mouth, making him look extremely sinister and terrifying. It's Black Mountain Tribe. This person, could he be the tribe leader of Black Mountain Tribe? I heard that the tribe leader of Black Mountain Tribe has an evil scar on his face. It must be him. That's right. I heard that the elder of Black Mountain Tribe didn't come this time. The tribe leader is leading them. There were 4 people following behind the burly man. They walked slowly towards the square. At first glance, the 4 people looked normal, but if anyone took a closer look, it would not be difficult to tell that 3 of the 4 people were young men of the same generation, and the last one was a burly man in his 40s. Yet strangely, the man and the other 2 young men were surrounding the other young man as if they were his subordinates. Even their footsteps instinctively did not exceed the young man's. The young man was dressed in a black beeskin shirt. He had long hair and looked to be about 18 or 19 years old. His face could not be seen clearly because his shirt was pulled up high above his chest. The black beeskin shirt covered everything below his eyes. He also had his head lowered, so his face could not be seen clearly. That person was silent. He did not react to the gazes from all directions. He walked into the crowd with the tribe leader and sat down cross-legged in a corner far away from Dark Mountain Tribe. From where they sat, it could be seen that the young man was different. He sat alone, as if he did not fit in with the other tribe members. Yet once he sat down, he lifted his head slightly and looked in the direction of Dark Mountain Tribe. There was a hint of disdain in his eyes. Su Ming's gaze was focused on the people from Black Mountain Tribe, just like the tribe leader and the obviously eccentric young man. They caught Su Ming's attention. Su Ming was not surprised by the strength of the tribe leader of Black Mountain Tribe, but the eccentric young man gave Su Ming a sense of danger. He was almost certain that this person was not an ordinary person. Yet in his heart, he was disgusted by this sort of act of pretending to be profound. In comparison, Su Ming even felt that Wu Sun was much stronger than this person in this aspect. At the very least, Wu Sun would not act so mysteriously. The arrival of Black Mountain Tribe did not stir up much discussion. Compared to them, the people were more interested in the prodigies from Windstream Tribe. After all, these people were famous in the area. With the enthusiastic young man by his side, Su Ming walked towards the prodigy of Windstream Tribe, Chen Chong, who was surrounded by a group of people. When he stood with so many people, he looked so inconspicuous and normal that no one would spare him a second glance. I'm telling you, I never go to those places in the tribe. Even if I go, I'll at most just watch the show. You don't believe me? Once they got closer, Su Ming saw Chen Chong gesturing with his hands as he spoke to the people beside him. His words caused the people around him to laugh, but most of the laughter was filled with flattery. Even the people around them who wanted to get to know Chen Chong started laughing instinctively, as if they wanted to use their laughter to blend into the group. The young man and the others beside Su Ming were doing the same. Their laughter did not stop. Su Ming stood there and smiled. His heart was calm as he looked at Chen Chong, who was surrounded by the crowd. Chen Chong's status was very high, and he could not compare to him. Looking at the few people around him, who were constantly trying to blend into this circle with laughter and even hurriedly introducing themselves when they found an opportunity, even though there was no flattering expression on their faces, anyone could see the desire in their bones to interact with them. It was at that moment that Dark Dragon Tribe walked into the field. Their appearance should not have attracted much discussion. After all, Dark Dragon Tribe was very small and could not compare to Black Mountain Tribe's fame. Yet the moment Dark Dragon Tribe appeared, even Chen Chong, who was chatting and laughing, and Wu Sun, who was meditating in the distance with a sullen expression, lifted their heads to look. The young man in black robes from Black Mountain Tribe who had half of his face covered and was pretending to be mysterious, and almost all the berserkers around them also looked over. What they saw was a beautiful girl dressed in white among the people of the Dark Dragon Tribe. The crystal at the center of the girl's brows shone brightly under the sunlight. There was a wildness to her beauty that could make people's hearts race. She was Bai Ling's face turned red when she was stared at by so many people, but she did not lower her head. Instead, she quickly scanned through the crowd. Once she found Dark Mountain Tribe, joy immediately appeared on her face. Yet when she took a closer look, the joy faded away. She did not find Su Ming. She lowered her head and followed behind the elder and old woman from Dark Dragon Tribe towards the field. At that moment, she did not notice that there was a normal-looking boy in the crowd in the distance. There was nothing special about him. He was looking at her quietly. She also did not notice that when the young man in black robes from Black Mountain Tribe, who was pretending to be mysterious, saw her, a hint of desire and greed appeared in his eyes. Wu Sun glanced at Bai Ling, then closed his eyes. Although Bai Ling was peerless, Wu Sun was not moved in the slightest. At this moment, the anxiety in his heart made it impossible for him to have any thoughts about other things. Su Ming looked at the beautiful face and stood there silently. He suddenly felt that the distance between him and Bai Ling was very, very far. Bai Ling, a cheerful voice came from near Su Ming. The voice was not loud, but it spread out and fell into Bai Ling's ears. Big brother Chen Chong. Bai Ling lifted her head and saw Chen Chong walking out of the crowd. A smile appeared on her face, but there was still sadness hidden under that smile. Chen Chong laughed. Most of the people in front of him moved aside. Su Ming stood there and did not move. He watched Chen Chong walk past him towards Bai Ling. As he watched, Su Ming closed his eyes. He did not know what he should be feeling at that moment. He only felt that he was very calm. With his eyes closed, He ignored everything around him until someone grabbed his arm and swung it excitedly. Yi Wang. It's Yi Wang. Look, that's Yi Wang, the strongest among the younger generation in Windstream Tribe. Yi Wang. The Yi Wang who obtained first place in all 3 stages of the test twice in a row. He's so talented that he's the strongest in the area. I heard that he's the one with the highest possibility of reaching the Transcendence realm among our generation. The entire Windstream Tribe is also training him with everything they have. He's the future elder of Windstream Tribe. Su Ming opened his eyes and saw a person walking towards him from the field in the distance. That person wore a red robe. He did not have Wu Sen's gloominess, Chen Chong's crowd surrounding him, nor did he have the mysterious facade of the young man in black robes from Black Mountain Tribe. He walked alone towards them. Chapter 54. His red robes were like fire. It was as if there was an invisible flame on this person's body that could burn the eyes of all those who looked at him and force them to lower their heads before him. His looks were average, and he was not handsome. His body was not strong either. But as he walked towards them, there was an indescribable feeling that rose in the hearts of all those who were looking at him. His black hair fell over his shoulders as Yi Wang walked towards them slowly. He did not have Wu Sen's gloom, but his calm demeanor was even scarier than Wu Sen's. He did not have Chen Chong's charisma, but even if he was alone, he still exuded a presence that could suppress everything else. He also did not pretend to be mysterious like the young man from Black Mountain Tribe, but as he walked towards them, his strength and his name gave off a mysterious feeling that far surpassed that of the young man in black robes. He was mysterious because he was Yi Wang. He was the most outstanding person of his generation in Windstream Tribe. He was the most arrogant person in the entire area. He was also known as the future powerful berserker of the Transcendence realm. He walked towards them calmly, like a king. There was no need for him to talk to anyone. There would be countless people who would ignore Wu Sun and Chen Chong. They would instinctively lower their heads and make way for him. There were no sounds of discussion. The moment he appeared, all the sounds fell silent. Even when he walked to the center of the field and sat down cross-legged, the silence was still not broken. After a long while, soft conversations could be heard in the area, as if they were slowly waking up. You saw the important person, right? If you can see Yi Wang, then our trip to this place won't be a waste. The honest-looking young man beside Su Ming spoke softly with envy and satisfaction in his eyes. Su Ming was silent. After a long while, he nodded his head gently. There were more people who came after Yi Wang. After an hour, all the people in the area had arrived. At that moment, the sky suddenly darkened. As the clouds rumbled, a shocking thunder roared and shook the entire area. Most of the people in the area were shocked. They lifted their heads and saw the clouds in the sky rapidly gathering together. In the blink of an eye, they fused together and turned into a person made of clouds that seemed to be able to support the sky and earth. There was a man in purple robes sitting cross-legged on the head of the humanoid cloud. That person was the elder of Windstream Tribe, Jingnan. He sat there cross-legged, not looking down. Instead, he was looking at the tall mountain not far away. He was looking at the towering mountain that pierced through the clouds. He could only see half of the mountain. This mountain is the most important treasure in Windstream Tribe. It has been passed down from the ancestors of the Berserkers and is the foundation of Windstream Tribe. Without this mountain, perhaps there would be no Windstream Tribe. The mountain you see is not complete. That is just the tip of the mountain. That is the real tip of Windstream Mountain. There is a strange beast sealed at the peak of this mountain. This beast has been in hibernation for tens of thousands of years and has yet to awaken. Perhaps it will never awaken. This mountain is filled with might, and its might is like a pressure that surrounds the entire mountain. The higher you go, the stronger the pressure. There are 218 steps leading to the top of the mountain. This is the first trial. The rules are the same as before. There is no time limit. All those who take part in the first trial take the plate and search for a path leading to the top of the mountain. Then, based on the number of steps you have taken, you will be ranked. This is the first time many of you have come here. To ensure fairness, I will tell you that the pressure on this mountain is the strongest at night. Now I will open the seal on this mountain. All of you enter quickly." As Jingnan spoke, he lifted his right hand and swung it towards the giant mountain. The moment he swung his arm, the giant cloud giant let out a shocking roar towards the sky. It took huge strides towards the mountain and lifted its two gigantic arms, as if it wanted to tear the sky and earth apart, and tore the mountain apart. The moment it tore the mountain apart, the sky and earth rumbled. A gigantic crack appeared out of nowhere in the sky. The crack spread to both sides vertically, as if there was an invisible picture screen outside the mountain. Now that the picture screen was torn apart, the real scene within was revealed. It was still the same tall mountain, but it was different from how Su Ming had seen it previously. Instead, it was filled with black fog that rose into the sky. The fog also made some of the tribe members turn pale and instinctively took a few steps back. It was as if the thing within the crack was not a mountain, but a gigantic, mysterious beast. At the same time, an indescribable pressure spread out from the torn crack. It was like a violent gust of wind sweeping through the area, lifting the long hair of countless people. Some of the tribe members even turned pale and instinctively took a few steps back. It was as if the thing within the crack was not a mountain, but a gigantic, mysterious beast. The moment the crack was torn open, a few indistinct shadows quickly solidified beside the giant cloud giant in the sky and turned into 8 people. Shihai was one of the 8 people. All of them had shocking levels of cultivation. When they appeared, they bit the tip of their tongues and coughed out a mouthful of blood. Their blood fused together and turned into a complicated pattern. As it flashed with a red light, it charged towards the crack and seemed to imprint itself on the mountain of fog within the crack. The mountain that was surrounded by clouds and fog rumbled at that moment. The fog tumbled upwards and revealed the ancient stairs at the foot of the mountain. Once you enter the mountain, if your plate leaves your body for even a little bit, it will disappear. You will also be disqualified and forced to leave the mountain. This is also the method for you to choose to stop moving forward and leave the mountain if you can't handle it. At the same time, this plate will also record the number of steps you've taken and display it outside. Now go in. The person who spoke was Shihai, one of the 8 people. He roared at the crowd beneath him. A person flew up and turned into a long arc that charged towards the crack. That person was Yi Wang, who was dressed in red robes. After him, Wu Sun was the second person to charge in. Chen Chong was right behind him. Slowly, a large number of people from the tribes who participated in the first stage rushed in. Bei Ling, Lei Chun, Wu La, Si Kong, and even Bai Ling were among them. Once they entered the crack, they searched for a staircase that no one took and disappeared into it. Whenever a staircase was chosen, a gust of fog would immediately descend and cover the staircase. Su Ming did not choose to move alone. Instead, he chose to enter the crack with a large group of people. The moment he stepped into the crack, he immediately felt that this place was different from the outside world. There was a pressure in this place. That pressure made him feel as if there was a pair of invisible hands pressing down on his body, making him feel uneasy. Many of the staircase paths before him were shrouded in fog. It was clear that someone had already entered the crack. Su Ming was not in a hurry. Instead, he ran into the distance. There were quite a number of people like him in this place. Most of them were searching for the staircase paths. That was why the foot of the mountain did not follow the rules. Some of the staircase paths seemed to be shorter than the others. These paths were usually fought over quickly by the people. Whoever took the first step on the staircase would be the one to take it. Su Ming did not join them. Instead, he went to a spot further away. There were a few paths there. He stood there and fell into deep thought. Just as he was about to move forward, he suddenly turned his head and looked to his right. His pupils shrank slightly. The young man from Black Mountain Tribe, who was dressed in black bee skins and was pretending to be mysterious, still had most of his face covered. He walked towards Su Ming coldly and did not even spare a glance at him. He walked up a flight of stairs. Su Ming watched as the young man disappeared into the path and was shrouded by the fog coming down from the mountain. He averted his gaze and walked towards a normal staircase. The moment he stepped on the first step, he felt the entire mountain tremble. At the same time, the plate on his chest let out a wave of heat, but it did not seep into Su Ming's body. Instead, it continued emitting heat. Then, he was surrounded by a large amount of fog. He couldn't see to his sides or behind him. The only thing he could see was the faintly discernible winding staircase in front of him, as well as the dim sun and the vast sky. It was quiet all around him. It was so quiet that it gave people the impression that they were the only ones in the mountain. Su Ming took a deep breath. He did not immediately move forward. Instead, he felt the pressure in the place. Once he got used to it, he lifted his feet and walked forward with determination in his eyes. At that moment, he did not know that once all of them stepped into the crack in the world outside was slowly closing up. Shurhai and the other 7 people landed in the sky and sat down cross-legged at the corners of the field. The elder of Windstream tribe, Jingnan, also dispersed the giant of clouds and landed on the field beside Mo Sang. An invisible wave of air surrounded the two of them, preventing anyone from investigating them. There were still hundreds of people in the field, and they were all staring at the 9 giant statues around them. Lines of words gradually appeared on the 9 statues. First place, Yi Wang, 97 steps. Second place, Wu Sun, 51 steps. Third place, Chen Chong, 47 steps. Fourth place, Bai Su, 46 steps. 103rd place, Mo Su, 6 steps. All the people who took part in the first stage could see the number of steps they had taken clearly due to their plates. As expected, the first place is Yi Wang. 97 steps. He's so much higher than the person in second place. Look, it changed again. 115 steps. How long has it been? It's too fast. Who is this Bai Su? I've never heard of him. He's not from Windstream tribe, but he's ranked so high in the initial stage. I heard that Yi Wang managed to get to 803 steps in the last test. I wonder how far he'll go this time. The higher he goes, the harder it is. I heard that no one has ever managed to get past 930 steps. Jingnan, the elder of Windstream tribe, also looked at the statue beside him. He looked at it together with Mo Sang. There was a smile on his face as he looked at Mo Su's name. Mo Sang, he's Su Ming, right? But judging by his rank, it'll be very difficult for him to get into the top 40. How about this? I'll relax my requirements. As long as he gets into the top 60, he'll pass. Mo Sang did not speak. He looked at Mo Su's name on the statue and remained silent. There was a hint of anticipation hidden deep within his eyes. Chapter 55. The hundreds of people in the field were all staring at the 9 eagle statues. The ranks on each of them were the same. When they looked at them, the sounds of discussion rose into the air. Sometimes they would cry out in surprise when someone's rank suddenly jumped up, and sometimes they would feel pity for someone who was clearly in the top ranks but had fallen down. It could be said that the competition in the mountain was secondary to the grand ceremony. The main focus of attention was on the field. Most of the hundreds of people in the field might not be from Windstream tribe, but there were quite a number of them who were from other tribes. It could be said that almost all the tribes in the area were here. They would announce the rankings of the 3 stages once they returned to their tribe so that everyone would know about it. This was the norm. It had been the same every year. As time slowly passed, Yi Wang, who was in first place, showed that he had reached the 345th step and was gradually slowing down. Chen Chong, who was behind him, followed closely behind. It appeared that he had reached the 189th step. As for Wu Sun, whom many people had high hopes for some unknown reason, he was ranked 9th, only 127th step. Instead, it was the person called Bai Su who caught the attention of the people in the field. He was in 3rd place and had taken the 188th step. Just who is this Bai Su? How can he be so powerful? Could it be that he'll be able to make it out of the first stage of the test? This is going to be interesting. It's been a long time since someone from an outsider tribe made it into the top 10. In fact, this hasn't happened many times in the top 30. As the crowd discussed among themselves, the tribe leader of Black Mountain Tribe stared at the ranks on one of the eagle statues nearby. A prideful smile appeared on his lips as he swept his gaze across Dark Mountain Tribe. Sean Hen sat cross-legged at the spot where Dark Mountain Tribe was. He closed his eyes and did not look at the ranks, as if he was not interested in it. As for the head of the guards, he was frowning as if he was anxious. He looked at the ranks on the eagle statue beside him and saw Bei Ling, who was in the 57th place, Lei Chun, who was in the 73rd place, and Wu La, who was in the 91st place. The old woman from Dark Dragon Tribe and the people from the other tribes were also watching intently. Most of them did not seem to be affected by the changes in their expressions. As the leaders of their tribes, they could basically hide their emotions. Unless there was a major change, they would rarely show any obvious emotions. As for the head of the guards from Dark Mountain Tribe, if it were not for Bei Ling, he would not have shown that hint of anxiety. Compared to the hundreds of people in the field who were discussing and watching of the people who were participating in the first stage of the test of the 100-something stairs in the mountain felt as if they were the only people in the mountain. Not only did the thick fog cover their vision, even those outside could not see what was going on inside. Even the elder of Windstream Tribe, Jing Nan, could not see through the fog formed by the seal. He could not see what was going on inside clearly. However, this place was not dangerous. After all, this test had been held too many times in the past. Bai Ling bit her lower lip as sweat appeared on her forehead. She walked up step by step. She couldn't see the end of the stairs in front of her, as if there was no end to it. It made people unconsciously feel a sense of loss as they walked up. In addition, the pressure grew stronger as they walked up, giving people a great sense of rejection. It was as if there were countless voices whispering in their ears, telling them to give up. Not too far away from Bai Ling, Lei Chun continued to roar. He even tore off most of his beast skin clothes, revealing his muscular upper body. Beads of sweat flowed down his body, causing his exhausted expression to turn ferocious. He walked up step by step, and madness and stubbornness could be seen in his eyes. Further away, Bei Ling's face was pale. He had given a lot of blood from the center of his brows to Wu Sun over the past few days. His body was already weak. According to the promise, he would receive a sliver of berserker blood from Wu Sun in the third stage. Yet he was anxious. He did not know if the promise would still be fulfilled. Bei Ling gritted his teeth. He did not want to lose completely. Instead, he walked up the stairs with his pride as a member of Dark Mountain Tribe. Compared to their difficulty, the most brilliant prodigy of Windstream Tribe, Yi Wang, who was dressed in red, was much more at ease. He placed his hands behind his back and walked up the stairs at a moderate pace. This was not the first time he had walked up the stairs. This was his third time. He could clearly remember that the second time he walked up the stairs, he had walked up to the 800th step. This time, his goal was the 900th step. The elder said that this mountain may seem tall, but there are only 999 steps. There is some sort of strange power contained in the construction of this mountain that seems to be able to change the world. The number of steps I can walk up will also indirectly reflect the number of blood veins I will eventually be able to train. I'll have to eat less next time. I have to eat less. Chun Chong was panting harshly on a small path behind Yi Wang. As he mumbled to himself, he walked up the stairs. He was slightly plump, and as he walked, his flesh seemed to be trembling. However, there was a fierce glint in his eyes. He looked at the plate in his hand, and as he stared at it, he could see all the rankings on it. He knew that there was a person called by Sue behind him. Further away was the young man from Black Mountain Tribe who was dressed in black beast skin and pretending to be mysterious. His expression was calm, as if he did not need to be too serious about the stairs. This is the first time I've come here. It would have been fine if I didn't come, but since I'm here, then it doesn't matter if it's Wu Sun, Chen Chong, or even Yi Wang, they will all have to step back. This time, I'll let everyone know that I, Bai Su, am the strongest prodigy among the berserkers in this area. There was a hint of fanaticism in the eyes of the young man with half of his face covered. Compared to these people, Su Ming had already been left far behind. His footsteps were slow, and he had only reached the 32nd step. When he reached the 32nd step, not only did Su Ming not continue moving forward, he lowered his head and fell into deep thought. He looked at the steps under his feet, and his eyes gradually lit up. The elder mentioned 6 numbers before, and the first number was 32. Could it be that he's talking about the 32nd step? As Su Ming fell into deep thought, he slowly lifted his foot and walked towards the 33rd step. Once he landed, he did not feel anything strange. It was as if the pressure was the same as when he stood on the 32nd step. There's nothing strange about it. It's the same. Su Ming frowned and walked up to the 34th step. Yet the moment his right foot landed, his body suddenly trembled. The same? No. He closed his eyes and placed his right foot on the 34th step. He carefully sensed the faint trace of pressure that was added to his body. Then he opened his eyes and quickly took a few steps back to the 31st step. He lifted his foot and stepped on the 32nd, then the 33rd. At that moment, Su Ming's eyes lit up and he took a deep breath. I see. The pressure will increase between the 31st and 33rd steps, but only the 32nd step is strange. When I stand there, it doesn't matter if I move back or move forward. I'll still feel the same pressure. It's as if the 32nd step doesn't exist. Even if the 32nd step doesn't exist, everything will still be the same. After a moment of thought, Su Ming decided not to move forward. Instead, he sat down cross-legged at the 32nd spot and felt the pressure pressing down on him. It made him uncomfortable, and at the same time, 40-something blood veins appeared on his body. The moment the blood veins appeared, Su Ming could feel that the pressure was reduced by a lot. If he did not pay close attention to it, it would be difficult for him to sense it. On most of the steps on this mountain, I can feel 2 different kinds of pressure. One comes from above, and the other comes from behind. Only these 32 places can balance the pressure from above and below. The 6 numbers that Elder told me must mean that there are 6 such places on this mountain. Perhaps this is what the Elder discovered when he participated in the test for Wind Stream Tribe. It's a secret. Su Ming slowly closed his eyes and circulated the blood veins in his body as he sat down. After a while, Su Ming opened his eyes and frowned. He did not feel any benefits. Even if he circulated his qi, it was the same as usual. It was as if nothing had changed. Su Ming still could not think of a reason as he thought about it. Yet he knew that the elder would not have told him this for no reason. There must be a secret he had yet to discover. But Su Ming scratched his head. Ever since he was young, the elder liked to talk to him like this. He would let him think about it. If he understood it, then he understood it. If he really did not understand it, then the elder would rarely tell him the answer. After thinking for a while, Su Ming sighed and looked at the 49 blood veins that appeared on his body. The presence of these blood veins allowed him to ignore the pressure in the place he was at. Why is the elder? Can't he just tell me? Just what kind of secret is hidden in this place? Su Ming did not want to give up. He continued sitting there and thought hard. Pressure. The pressure from above and below. I could feel the presence of this pressure. But when I sit here, the blood in my body will flow faster under the pressure, and my blood veins will naturally appear to fight against it. This is... Su Ming suddenly had a thought. It was as if he had an epiphany, but he had a vague feeling that he could not control it. He widened his eyes and took a deep breath. He lowered his head and looked at the 49 blood veins on his body. Could it be that the elder's secret is to tell me how to control the blood veins on my body and make them disappear one by one, just like how they appeared? And because there's such a balanced pressure here, it's like the power of the world outside, making it possible for me to do something that should have been impossible. Su Ming's body trembled. The reason I'm doing this is so that I can control my blood veins more flexibly than anyone else. When I throw a punch, I can control the number of blood veins. I can make sure that each punch contains enough power and not waste too much. Su Ming licked his lips instinctively and closed his eyes. He quietly tried to control the blood veins in his body so that they would not dissipate completely, but only one, as if they were flowing in reverse. It was very difficult. Chapter 56. It was difficult, because it was easy to follow orders, but it was difficult to go against them. For example, Blood veins would appear one by one as his chi circulated through his body. There was even a possibility that all of them would appear in an instant. This was easy, yet if he wanted to make them disappear one by one, then he would need to accurately control the speed at which his chi circulated through his body. That precision had to be as precise as fine control. It was rare for a berserker in the blood solidification realm to be able to do this. In fact, this was not something that a berserker in the blood solidification realm should be able to do. This was something that powerful berserkers in the transcendence realm needed to understand and execute. Su Ming did not know any of this. All he knew was that the elder had taught him to do this. It was as if he was trying to solve a riddle. He wanted him to find the answer himself, and as he thought about it, he gradually felt that he should do it. There was not a hint of forcefulness, neither was there a hint of force. Everything was so natural that it made Su Ming feel that he should give it a try. Or else, it would be a waste of the answer he had spent so much time thinking about. Time passed by slowly. In the blink of an eye, 2 hours went by. During those 2 hours, Su Ming sat still and continued trying to circulate the qi in his body. The blood veins on his body started changing in a strange manner. The 49 blood veins would occasionally decrease by a dozen-something veins, and at other times, they would explode and return to 49 veins. As the cycle continued, the blood veins seemed to be progressing steadily. All of this was largely related to the stable pressure in the area. It could even be said that only with the help of this external force could a berserker in the blood solidification realm achieve fine control, something only berserkers in the transcendence realm could do. As time slowly passed, it was soon dusk. At dusk, the mist on the mountain became even thicker, and it was completely silent. However, the public square outside was the exact opposite of the scene on the mountain. It was extremely lively, and the sounds of discussions could be heard continuously. There were even quite a few people who took out stone coins and started to gamble. The first place is still Yi Wang. Look, he's already at the 516th step. The second place is Chun Chong. He's only at the 328th step. That's nothing. I've been keeping an eye on the third place by Su. He's definitely an accident in this test. I'm afraid everyone has the same feeling. This person I've never heard of is already at the 327th step. There's only one step between him and the second place. They've been alternating between each other for the entire afternoon. It's a pity that Wu Sun is only at the 12th place. In the corner of the field, Mo Sang and Windstream's Jing Nan sat with their legs crossed. No one dared to disturb them. There was also an invisible barrier around them that separated them from the outside world. Mo Sang, Su Ming hasn't moved from the 32nd spot for the entire afternoon. I think he's feeling a little tired. He's now ranked last. Jing Nan frowned slightly. He felt that something was off. Mo Sang did not speak. He only looked at the ranking on the eagle statue. His expression remained the same, but in his heart, he was happy. He knew that Su Ming had understood. In his eyes, if Su Ming could figure it out on his own, it would be even more precious to him than if he obtained the berserker blood. When dusk arrived, the sun and moon appeared in the sky at the same time, faintly changing places. Su Ming's ranking did not attract too much attention. Most of the people only swept their gazes past him to see who was ranked last. At that moment, Su Ming was still sitting cross-legged on the 32nd step. He did not seem to have changed much, but if anyone took a closer look, they would be able to see that the 49 blood veins on his body were changing rapidly. Sometimes they would be at 46, sometimes they would be at 47, and sometimes they would be at 48. Due to the speed of the changes, it was difficult to tell if one did not look closely. At that moment, Su Ming was still sitting on the 32nd step. He did not seem to have changed much, but if anyone took a closer look, they would be able to see that the 49 blood veins on his body were changing rapidly. Sometimes they would change to 46, sometimes they would change to 47, and sometimes they would change to 48. Due to the speed of the changes, if they did not look closely, they would not be able to see it. At that moment, Su Ming opened his eyes. There was a hint of excitement in his eyes. He did it. It may not be perfect, but he did it. Out of 10 times, he could make only one blood vein disappear 9 times. Even though it was only one vein, it meant that Su Ming had already gained initial control over the circulation of his qi. His qi no longer flowed out like a wild horse without a leash, but he had a rein on it. Slowly, as he sat there, the number of blood veins on his body increased to 47, 46, 45. When the number reached 38, he could no longer control his qi, and it became chaotic. Su Ming knew that it was because the pressure on the 32nd step was no longer enough to help him. If he wanted to take another step forward, he would have to go to the 79th step. Su Ming's eyes shone brightly. Without any hesitation, he stood up and took a step forward. He landed on the 33rd step and walked forward without a hint of hesitation. As he walked up each step and as the pressure from the mountain enveloped him, the 49 blood veins in Su Ming's body suddenly appeared and circulated rapidly. His fine control during the afternoon was not just an achievement, it also included his control over his blood veins. The moment his blood veins erupted, muffled rumbling sounds came from within Su Ming's body. The rumbling sounds were not loud. However, as the sound reverberated, a 50th line of blood appeared on his body. Once the 50th blood vein appeared, the 51st followed. It did not end there. As Su Ming walked up the stairs, 37th, 42nd, 49th, 58th, very soon, the moment he reached the 60th step, the 52nd blood vein appeared on Su Ming's body. With one more, he would be able to reach the 5th level of the blood solidification realm. At that moment, he could even practice the berserker art, dark blood dust. The muffled sound from his body may not have traveled too far, but by Su from Black Mountain Tribe, who was 300-something steps away from him, heard it as he walked down the stairs. He stopped and turned his head around to look. That's the sound of someone breaking through the number of blood veins. Someone increased their blood veins here? Who could it be? He fell into a moment of silence, but did not pay too much attention to it. He continued walking forward. It may have been his first time here, but before he came, he had made ample preparations. Bai Su knew that during the first stage of the test, the pressure on the mountain during the night was much stronger than during the day. That was why almost everyone would stop when the moon hung high in the sky and it was late at night. After all, if they continued moving forward at this time, they would have to pay a higher price, and it was not worth it. It was better to rest for the night and continue when the sun rose. That way, he could ensure that he was at his best condition. That was why he had to walk as much as possible before he rested before midnight arrived. When the number of blood veins in Su Ming's body increased to 52, he continued moving forward. He walked up the stairs and headed towards the top of the mountain, which he could not see the end of. At that moment, he did not know that his rapid advance had stirred up a small storm in the field outside. Most of the hundreds of people in the field were looking at the changes in the top 50 ranks, but they would occasionally look at the person called Mo Su, who was ranked last. They would mock him in their hearts. After all, in their eyes, that person had spent the entire afternoon on the 32nd step without moving, as if he did not have the strength to continue moving forward. But now, when a burly man among the hundreds of people looked at the changes in the top 50 with envy, he subconsciously glanced at the last place and was stunned for a moment. Then, his eyes abruptly widened. He saw with his own eyes that the number behind Mo Su's name, who was in last place, had suddenly increased explosively. 33, 37, 45, 48, until it reached 61, 63, and it was still increasing. He also looked at the ranking. From the last place, Mo Su's name had risen by more than 10 places, and it was still increasing. Very soon, he was not the only one who saw this abnormal change. Many people also noticed it, and when they looked over, they were all shocked. It was as if the attraction of the top 50 was not as attractive as the person ranked last. That person called Mo Su is actually starting to rise. Could it be that he just woke up after resting for the entire afternoon? He's already at the 137th place. He climbed by more than 10 places from the last place. This guy's getting stronger after the fact. Let's see whether he can get into the top 120. He's in the 119th place, the 79th step. Why did he stop again? He actually stopped again. The people who were paying attention to Su Ming's rank were disappointed when they saw Mo Su, who was ranked at the 119th place, and that the number on the 79th step had not changed for a long time. I thought that there would be another accident, but it's a pity that he doesn't have enough strength left. The 79th step should be his limit. This should be the strength that he's been accumulating for the entire afternoon, and now it's all released in one go. Gradually, the people in the field no longer paid attention to the ordinary name. Instead, they placed their attention on the top 50. It was almost midnight. Based on the usual practice, no one would climb the stairs during midnight. The ranking at that time would be the end of the day. At the corner of the field, Mo Sang looked at the rapidly rising ranking and saw Su Ming stopping at the 79th step. A smile appeared at the corners of his lips. By his side, Jing Nan, the elder of Windstream tribe, was still frowning. The 100-something names on the eagle statue that he was looking at seemed to have disappeared. There was only one name left, 119. Mo Su, the 79th step. As Su Ming's rank continued rising, Wu La was looking at the plate in her hands anxiously as she stood on one of the stairs in the giant mountain. She could see the ranking on it. 118. Wu La, the 82nd step. After a while, when Wu La saw that the person called Mo Su was still at the 79th step, she let out a sigh of relief. She gritted her teeth and continued moving up the stairs. Chapter 57. Su Ming stood on the 79th step. He looked around him, especially at the moon in the sky. There was still some time before midnight. Even so, Su Ming still felt comfortable in the moonlit night. Ever since he started practicing the fire berserker art, Su Ming fell in love with moonlit nights. He especially looked forward to the full moon. Su Ming had never seen a full moon while practicing the fire berserker art. Even if it happened once, it was a day when dark clouds covered the moon. He felt restless in his body when he was in the cave, but there were not many changes in his body. However, Su Ming analyzed it himself. If it was not for the dark clouds that covered the moon that day, perhaps he would have felt different. It was a pity that it was not a full moon yet, but Su Ming still felt very at ease. At the same time, he could also feel the pressure coming from the mountain becoming stronger as he went up the stairs, and it also seemed to be gradually becoming stronger as the moon rose up. The elder of Windstream tribe once said that the pressure from the mountain would increase at night. It seems like it's true. Su Ming smiled. He did not pay much attention to it. To him, the pressure from the mountain would increase at night, but it was also when Su Ming's power would reach its peak. Su Ming was much scarier at night than during the day. Su Ming averted his gaze from the moon and sat down cross-legged on the 79th step. He took a deep breath and quietly felt the difference in the place. It was just as he expected. This was the second place where the pressure on the stairs was balanced. Even though the pressure here was balanced, it was much stronger than on the 32nd step. It was very suitable for him to control his qi into fine detail and make the blood veins appear and disappear in his body even more accurately. At that moment, Su Ming could already feel the fine control over his qi. With just one more blood veins, he would be able to reach the 5th level of the blood solidification realm. This made Su Ming incredibly excited. He wanted to know just how many blood veins he would gain when the 79th step was no longer suitable for him to train. He wanted to know just how many blood veins he would gain when he stood up and walked towards a higher step. Su Ming slowly closed his eyes and quietly circulated the qi in his body. He began fine control once again, trying to reverse the speed of his qi so that it would slow down according to his will. As time passed, the 52 blood veins on his body gradually decreased in a steady manner, slowly reaching the limit of the 32nd step. However, because of the addition of 3 blood veins, the blood veins on his body continued to disappear, leaving him with 40 blood veins. Su Ming's expression was calm. He did not panic. He slowly circulated his qi and immersed himself in fine control. Time passed by and soon, 2 hours had passed. At that moment, there were quite a number of people in the mountain who had given up on moving forward. They chose to sit on the stairs to meditate. As they trained, they observed the plate in their hands to know the rankings while they waited for the next day to come. Wu Sun was panting heavily, and his face was pale. Gritting his teeth, he walked up a few more steps until he reached the 295th. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore and sat down off to the side. His face was grim as he stared at the fog, and his eyes gradually filled with confusion. My blood of corpses. Damn it. That person stole my blood of corpses. Without it, not only will I not be able to improve, I'll also become weaker. I can already feel myself weakening. I can't tell the elder about this unless it's absolutely necessary. Once the elder knows that I lost my blood of corpses, even if he finds it for me, he won't take me seriously. When he thought of the terrifying consequences, Wu Sun clenched his fists. There was a hint of fear in the confusion in his eyes. I can't let anyone else know, especially those who gave me their blood of corpses. I could oppress them all these years because of my strength and my status in the tribe. Once they know that I lost my blood of corpses, they'll immediately betray me. What should I do? What should I do? Wu Sen's face was twisted. He gritted his teeth, but he was mostly still lost. Chen Chong panted harshly. As he walked, he mumbled under his breath. He looked at the bright moon in the sky, which was no longer covered by the fog. He wanted to stop and rest until tomorrow, but when he looked at the ranking on the plate in his hand, he saw that the person called by Su had surpassed him. He was only 2 steps ahead of him, and he could not accept it. Damn you, I don't believe it. Chen Chong gritted his teeth and continued walking. At the same time, Black Mountain Tribes by Su was also panting harshly. He looked at the plate in his hand and gritted his teeth as he faced the increasingly powerful pressure under the moon. He forced his way up the stairs, as if he was facing Chen Chong. After another hour, Chen Chong's legs trembled. He let out a loud roar and sat by the side. Then, he shouted a few times at the quiet fog around him. Go! Go! Damn it! I'm not competing today. I'll come back tomorrow. Perhaps Bai Su had sensed it, but he took a few more steps before he sat down on the ground with a thud. But when he looked at his own rank on the ranking board, a sinister smile appeared on his lips. Lei Chen was already sitting on the 130th step. He kept sighing, and there was a look of indignation on his face. Many people had already stopped, but there was still one person who continued moving forward. 563, 567, 572. That Yuang is still moving forward in the middle of the night. The second place is Bai Su. He's only at 397 steps, but the Yuang is already at more than 500 steps. Is he going to ignore the increasing pressure at night and continue moving forward, as expected of the strongest among his peers? That determination alone is not something the others can compare to. The hundreds of people in the square were all staring at the names on the statues. Right now, only the number 1 position on the list was still changing. All the other people who were participating in the first stage had already stopped. 587, 589. It changed again. This time, it's 595. An uproar broke out in the field. Everyone was staring at the first place on the ranking board. Even the leaders of the other tribes were sighing in their hearts. A hint of respect rose within them towards Yuang. Mo sang, "Our tribe's Yuang is very talented. How does he compare to you in the past?" The elder of Windstream tribe, Jing Nan, smiled as he looked at the ranking board on the eagle statue and spoke slowly. Mo Sang's face was calm as he smiled faintly. Not bad. Jing Nan smiled and didn't talk much about this matter. At that moment, on the mountain, Yuang had a determined look on his face. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but he continued walking forward with his hands behind his back. Even if each step was difficult, he did not hesitate. Only when he reached the 600th step did he stop. A smile appeared on his face, and he sat down cross-legged by the side. Last time, on the first day, I reached 580 steps. This time, I've surpassed 20 steps. That's enough. I wonder if I'll be able to discover the test at the 562nd step this time. Thinking about it, it should be the same as before. No one is qualified to experience the test at the 562nd step. As he mumbled, there was an undisguised arrogance on his face. The 562nd step was a hurdle. He had failed at that hurdle during his first attempt and only succeeded during his second attempt. Now that he was on his third attempt, he did not pay too much attention to it. Besides, To him, none of the participants had the right to compete against him, and none of them had the right to make him pay attention to them. He did not even look at the plate for the entire day. He did not want to compete against the participants, but against himself. When he stopped, the sounds of discussion continuously rose from the plaza below. In everyone's opinion, the competition for the day had completely ended with Yi Wang's stop. Next, they would have to wait until the sun rose before they could start again. The first is Yi Wang, the second is Bai Su, the third is Chun Chong, the 12th is Wu Sun. Now, there's only one outsider among the top 10 on the first day. The others are all from Windstream Tribe, but the 48th is Bai Ling, and the 49th is Si Kong. They're also outsiders. I wonder if they'll be able to maintain their positions in the top 50 tomorrow. After all, this is just the first day. Tomorrow is the key. Just which tribe does Bai Su belong to? He's so amazing that he managed to get second place. He even surpassed Chun Chong. This person will definitely be famous from now on. It's not over yet. Something unexpected might happen. The buzzing sounds of discussion gradually died down. Most of the hundreds of people in the area sat down cross-legged and waited for the second day to arrive. Gradually, besides the sounds of breathing, the area became peaceful again. Mo saying, "Come back to the tribe with me and continue playing chess. We'll come back tomorrow and see whether your Su Ming can get into the top 50. Jing Nan smiled faintly and looked at Mo Sang. Mo Sang did not speak. Instead, he looked at Su Ming, whose rank had dropped from 120 to 123 on the eagle statue. He nodded. The two of them were about to leave when suddenly, the elder's pupils shrank. Soon after, some of the tribe members who had not rested and were still occasionally looking at the rankings on the field immediately let out cries of surprise. "He's moving. That guy called Mo Su has moved." That cry of surprise immediately made the people who had their eyes closed open their eyes instinctively and looked over. The moment they saw it, surprise appeared on their faces. Jing Nan, who was originally prepared to leave, also stopped and looked over with rapt attention. He was not the only one. All the people in the field, including the elder of Dark Dragon Tribe, the tribe leader of Black Mountain Tribe, and the leaders of the other tribes all looked over. After all, it was late at night, and all the people who were participating in the tournament had stopped moving forward. The sudden increase in the number of blood veins in his body was especially eye-catching. Deep in the mountains, Su Ming, who was meditating on the 79th step, opened his eyes abruptly. His control over the blood veins in his body froze. When there were only 28 blood veins left, he had reached his limit and could no longer continue. This time, it was much smoother than before. He also moved much faster because it was nighttime. Under the moonlight, there was a faint red shadow of the moon in Su Ming's eyes. He stood up slowly and looked at the winding steps before him. A glint flashed briefly in his eyes. Next, Su Ming lifted his right foot. Under the moonlight, when all the people in the mountain besides him, be it Chun Chong, Bai Su, or even Yi Wang, did not dare move forward, Su Ming moved forward. The moonlight belonged to him. Chapter 58. There was intelligence and light in Su Ming's eyes. Under the moonlit night, when no one on the mountain moved even an inch, he faced a powerful pressure coming from the top of the mountain and lifted his feet, then walked forward one step at a time. The 80th step, the 81st, the 82nd, the pressure from the mountain was much stronger at night compared to when it was daytime, and the higher Su Ming went, the more shocking the pressure became. Yet it was precisely because it was a moonlit night that belonged to Su Ming. As he moved forward, the moon in the sky shone with a bright light. There did not seem to be anything strange about it, but there was a hint of moonlight that no one could notice descending from the sky and fusing into Su Ming's body, causing the faint shadow of the moon in his eyes to gradually become clearer. Slivers of cool air flowed through Su Ming's body, causing his speed to increase. 87th, 88th, 93rd. Very soon, Su Ming arrived at the 99th step. The moment his right foot landed on the stairs, Su Ming's entire body trembled. Waves of hot qi erupted within his body, causing his body to tremble slightly. Immediately, 52 blood veins appeared on his body. Those 52 blood veins started twisting, as if they were forming a strange picture. Su Ming stopped and let out a low roar towards the sky. His roar was not loud and only echoed in the air. Suddenly, the 53rd blood vein appeared on his body. The appearance of this blood vein meant that Su Ming had broken through the 4th level of the blood solidification realm and entered the 5th level. A muffled sound that sounded like thunder came from within his body. It reverberated through the air and turned into a series of booming sounds. The sound seemed to be swallowed by the black fog on both sides of his body and traveled to an unknown place. The moment Su Ming broke through the 4th level of the blood solidification realm and entered the 5th level, Chen Chong, who was sitting paralyzed on another path not too far away from him, mumbled to himself as he prepared to rest. Suddenly, his body trembled, and he instinctively turned his head to look at the black fog beside him. There was a muffled roar echoing in his ears. He was familiar with that sound. This, damn it, someone broke through here? Chen Chong was stunned for a moment. His eyes were filled with disbelief, and the muscles on his face quivered. He had never heard of anyone breaking through during the first round of the trials. This was the first time. He rubbed his eyes hard and felt that something was wrong. He quickly rubbed his ears and tilted his head to listen carefully. He saw his ears move a few times strangely and instantly turned red. Chen Chong had been born with an innate talent since he was young. His ears were the strongest. Even if he was very far away and others could not hear anything, he could clearly hear it. He had been good at this since he was young. Now that his cultivation had increased and he had become stronger, he was quite proud of himself. As he listened, bitterness appeared on Chen Chong's face, as well as a look of indignation. Fudge! What kind of luck is this? He actually made a cultivation-based breakthrough here. God, why can't I encounter something like this? Chen Chong let out a long sigh, looking rather envious. Besides Chen Chong, who was able to hear the muffled boom due to his innate talent, most of the others could not hear it. Only Bai Su from Black Mountain Tribe, who was sitting very close to Su Ming, opened his eyes abruptly. There was a surprised look on his face as he turned around to look at the fog behind him. Someone broke through. Bai Su's face was dark. He remembered hearing the sound of blood veins increasing. When he connected the dots, a glint appeared in his eyes, but he did not pay too much attention to it. Instead, he took out the plate and checked the changes in the ranks. Almost at the first glance, he saw the name that had increased by leaps and bounds while everyone else's ranks and the number of steps remained the same. At that moment, due to Su Ming's actions, a huge commotion was stirred up in the field outside the mountain. Almost everyone's gazes were focused on Mo Su's name on the ranks on the eagle statues. It was a dark night. In the past, everyone would rest during the first stage of the test. It was the same in the mountain, and it was the same in the field. However, this night was different from the past. All of this was because of a rank that was rising rapidly. He moved 99th step. He went from 79th step to 99th step in one go. This person was like this before. It's as if once he had enough rest, he'll start climbing madly. His name is Mo Su. I remember him. He was originally in the last place, but he suddenly shot up and went up to the 119th place. Then he stopped and fell to the 123rd place. Look, he's now in the 113 RD place. No, 109th, 100s, 101st place. He actually went up to the 101st place. This person is amazing. Ha, I didn't expect to run into something like this tonight. All right, let's see just how high this Mo Su can go. The entire field was in an uproar. Countless discussions could be heard, and the place was even livelier than it was during the day. Even some of the tribe members who originally did not pay attention to the ranks after the 100th opened their eyes and looked over. In the tests that had been held in the past, almost no one paid much attention to the people at the bottom. Most of the time, they would place their gazes on the top 50, or even the top 30, or even the top 10, or even the top 3. Yet this time, it was different. It was a rarely seen ranking that caused the people in the area to discuss it in such a manner. However, even though these people were passionately discussing and were in an uproar, staring at the ranking without blinking. In reality, there was no one here who paid too much attention to him. In their eyes, this person called Mo Su was merely an entertainment that everyone found to pass the time at night after the other participants of the great competition had stopped for the night. Once the sun rose and the other participants started moving, they would automatically ignore Mo Su. After all, compared to the prodigies, Mo Su's steps and ranking were incomparable. Su Ming's strange actions also attracted the attention of many of the participants on the mountain. Most of them were resting and looking at the plates in their hands. It was especially so for those who were ranked lower. They could not help but feel a little nervous. However, those who were ranked higher would only cast a glance at the plates and then no longer pay attention to them. Wu La was very nervous. She sat on the 112th step and stared at the plate in her hands with wide eyes. She was very concerned about this person called Mo Su. He was the one who had rushed up from the bottom in one breath, and it had made Wu La feel a lot of pressure. I've worked hard for the entire day and finally made it to the 100th place. That damn Mo Su, just who is he? Why is he doing this? Everyone is resting now, and the pressure from the moon has increased. Why is he doing this? Wu La bit her lip. She felt wronged in her nervousness. Yet after a while, she saw that Mo Su, who was at the 101st place, did not seem to have changed. It was as if he had stopped. Wu La let out a sigh of relief. He's already at his limit. Lei Chen was sitting on the 135th step and looking at the plate in his hands. He was also looking at Mo Su's name. However, his expression was slightly different. He seemed to be deep in thought. At the same time, Bei Ling, who was at the 206th step, also looked at the ranking on the plate. However, he did not pay much attention to it. To him, this person was just trying to impress the crowd. He did not move during the day, but chose to move at night. It was obvious that he was trying to attract attention. Child's play. Bei Ling laughed coldly. Dark Dragon Tribe's Si Kong, who was also at the 200th place but was lower than Bei Ling, was frowning. He had already looked at the ranking on the plate in his hands many times today. He had been searching for Su Ming's name, but he could not find it. As for Mo Su's name, he had already automatically ignored it. In his eyes, Su Ming's rank should be similar to his. It was impossible for him to be below the 100th place. If that was the case, then it would be difficult for him to accept losing to such a weakling. On another path, Bai Ling was sitting at the 130th step. She lifted her head and looked at the moon. She did not look at the ranking. Instead, there was a dazed look on her face. No one knew what she was thinking. The people in the field also waited for a while. When they saw that Mo Su, who was at the 101st place on the eagle statue, did not make any changes, they were disappointed, but also relieved. It was as if all of this was within their expectations. The leaders of the tribes also slowly averted their gazes and no longer looked at Mo Su. The old woman from Dark Dragon Tribe slowly closed her eyes. She did not look at Mo Su at all. It was as if she was not interested in any of this. The tribe leader of Black Mountain Tribe had a mocking smile on his face. The only person he paid attention to was Bai Su. If there was anyone else, then it would be Yi Wang, who was ranked first. In his eyes, Bai Su's only opponent was Yi Wang. After a while, when they saw that Mo Su still did not make any changes, the discussions in the field gradually died down. It's clear that this person has been saving up his strength. He purposely chose to make his move at night when no one else is moving. He must know that he won't attract any attention, so he might as well use this method to make himself a little famous. Not bad. That's a smart method. At least I remember his name now. I'd like to see who he is. Oh well, let's all rest. Tomorrow is the key. Who knows, the top 50 rankings might change. Ah, it's moving. It's moving. Just as the intense atmosphere from before was about to dissipate, a voice filled with surprise suddenly echoed in the surroundings. Mo Su's name was rising again and again. The number of steps behind his name was also increasing madly at a speed that the people in the field could not believe. 100 steps, 103, 107, 112. Chapter 59. Su Ming moved. He lifted his foot and stepped on the 100th step. He had been standing on the 99th step for a long time, because when the 53rd blood vein appeared, the chi in his body started tumbling violently and surrounded his body. He needed his body to get used to it before he could continue moving forward. After all, the appearance of the blood vein meant that he had broken through to the next level of cultivation. It was not a normal increase. As he moved, Su Ming rose into the air. His body seemed to be continuously absorbing the moonlight as he moved forward. In the blink of an eye, he was already on the 115th step. Su Ming did not stop. As he sensed the increasingly stronger pressure coming from the top of the mountain, he rushed forward. 120 steps, 130 steps, 140 steps, 150 steps, 160 steps. In the span of a few breaths, Su Ming had already walked up 60 steps. When he stood on the 160th step, Su Ming felt as if the pressure from the top of the mountain was crashing down on him. It was as if a huge force had appeared and was pressing down on his body. Yet at that moment, the moon was shining brightly in the sky. Moonlight surrounded Su Ming's entire body, causing his black hair that was tied up by the hemp rope to float in the air. As soon as he moved, almost half of the participants on the mountain, as well as the public square outside, instantly fell into a dead silence. Wu La was stunned. She was originally worried about her ranking. She was originally feeling wronged and unwilling to admit defeat. Yet now, as her expression turned blank, all her complicated thoughts disappeared. She understood that she was not at the same level as Su Ming. If they were not at the same level, then why did she force herself to compare herself to him? This sort of comparison would only bring humiliation upon herself. Lei Chen stood up abruptly and looked at the plate in his hands with a dumbfounded expression. He had some guesses about Mo Su's name, but now he was doubtful of his guesses. He could not be sure whether his guesses were correct or not. Bei Ling held onto the plate in his hand tightly. His heart raced against his chest. During that instant just now, he felt as if his soul had been shaken to the core. He watched as the person called Mo Su walked up 60 steps in a single breath. That speed was so fast that he could not believe it. It almost made him forget to breathe. He had originally thought that the other party had forcibly walked out in the middle of the night in order to attract attention. But now that he looked at it, that was not the case at all. The other party clearly possessed true strength. Otherwise, how could he have reached the 60th step in just a few breaths? The entire mountain was silent. In this silence, Chen Chong forcefully blinked his eyes. He had the intention to ignore it, but his instincts told him that this person called Mo Su was very likely the fellow he had heard the rumbling sound of a breakthrough earlier. It should be him. It should be. But who could he be? He's not from Windstream Tribe. I don't know if I've seen him in the field before. At this moment, Chen Chong did not know that among the crowd that surrounded him and laughed along with him in an attempt to blend into his circle, there was a person with a very faint smile and a very ordinary appearance. It was so faint that it was barely discernible, so ordinary that no one paid attention to it. That person was also looking at Chen Chong, at him talking and laughing, at him being surrounded by the crowd, at him walking towards Bai Ling. Just as Chen Chong was deep in thought, Bai Su widened his eyes as he stood on the path closest to Su Ming. It was as if he wanted to see through the fog and see what the person on the path beside him looked like. Bai Su was different from Chen Chong. He was too close to Mo Su. He was almost certain that the person called Mo Su was at the bottom of the path behind the fog, and he was very close to him. He's only at the 160th step. Compared to me, the difference is more than double. This person is nothing to worry about. If he can get close to me, then it won't be too late for me to pay attention to him. Bai Su thought in his heart and closed his eyes with a cold smile. Wu Sen's face was dark as he stood on the path on the other side of the mountain. His eyes sparkled as he stared at the rankings on the plate. He spent a lot of time on Bai Su and Mo Su's names. I'm now at the 12th place, 295th step. Oh well, I can't enter the top 10. I can feel my weakness getting worse. The person who stole my blood of corpses that night must be one of these two people. Wu Sun was not stupid. In fact, he was very smart, or else he would not have been able to occupy a certain position in the tribe, which was filled with internal strife. He would not have been able to control the people, including Bei Ling, in his hands. Bai Su. Wu Sen's gaze swept past Mo Su's name, and a ferocious glint appeared in his eyes. He stared at Bai Su, who was ranked second, but there was a hint of wariness in the depths of that ferociousness. Wu Sun did not have the confidence that he would be able to retrieve his blood of corpses from the person who was ranked second. Si Kong's face was filled with anxiety. His current appearance was very similar to Wu La's. When he saw Mo Su's name at the 160th step, his heart raced. He was worried that he would be surpassed. It would have been fine if it was during the day, but it was late at night. He did not have the confidence to continue. Besides, he was ranked 49th. Once he was surpassed, he would immediately be ranked 50th. There might be a difference of one place, but the meaning behind it was completely different. Apart from them, almost everyone who was participating in the Great Entrance Test had their gazes focused on the name Mo Su on their tokens. Yi Wang was the only one who did not look at his plate, so he did not know what had happened. However, with his personality, even if he knew, he would not care about it. Compared to the dead silence in the mountain, the field was now truly silent. That silence made it seem as if someone's breathing had been stopped, and they could not make a single sound. The power that gripped the necks of many people in the field came from their own shock. It came from the same ranking on the eagle statues. 63rd, Mo Su, 160th step. After experiencing the sudden increase in rankings and the number of steps, many of the people present could no longer treat Mo Su's name as a joke to pass the time at night. Instead, they began to take him seriously. That was because the sudden increase in the number of steps to the 60th had caused an unbelievable shock to surface in their hearts. If it was during the day, perhaps they would not be able to use the word shocked. However, it was now night, a night where the pressure of the mountain was hundreds of times higher than that of the day. To almost everyone, if one could reach the 160th step in a few breaths at night, then that number would double in the day. There weren't many people who could do this among the clansmen of all the tribes who participated in the competition. Who is he? Mo Su. Mo Su. I calculated just now. In less than 10 breaths' time, he went from the 99th step to the 160th step. This is unbelievable. His ranking went from the 101st to the 63rd in an instant. Since this person has such strength, if he did this during the day, he could even make it into the top 30. Why did he do this at night? After a long while, the sounds of discussion gradually appeared in the square, and it became more and more intense. Even the leaders of the various tribes looked over. However, the old woman from Dark Dragon Tribe and the tribe leader of Black Mountain Tribe did not pay any attention to them. This night was bound to be extraordinary. This night was bound to be filled with glory, and it belonged to one person, Su Ming. Mo Sang smiled faintly as he looked at the ranking on the eagle statue. The anticipation in his heart grew stronger. He knew that Su Ming had completely understood the meaning behind the 6 numbers. By his side, Jingnan, the elder of Windstream Tribe, had a calm expression on his face. Not a hint of emotion could be seen on his face. With his power and status, if he could not hide his emotions, he would not have his current status and power. Not bad, Mo Sang. The child you brought back was taught well by you. Honestly, I've always been curious about his background. Jingnan smiled faintly and looked at Mo Sang. Curious? If I told you that he's the prince of the Great Yu dynasty, would you believe me? Mo Sang looked at Jingnan and spoke with a smile. It was impossible to tell whether he was lying or not from his expression. Perhaps no one else knew about the secret of Su Ming's background besides himself. Why don't you say that he's the son of the god of berserkers? Interesting. Jing Nan was momentarily stunned before he laughed out loud. Perhaps he is, Mo Sang said with a smile. Jing Nan laughed, but his heart was somewhat bewildered and uncertain. He did not know whether he should believe Mo Sang's words or not. This sort of thinking made him extremely unhappy. In the years that he had grown up, every time he met Mo Sang, he would always have this sort of feeling. At that moment, a cry of surprise appeared once again in the midst of the discussions in the field. He's moving again. Just how many steps is he going to take before he stops? Look, he's at the 168th step. 172, 179. This speed seems to be a little slower than before. This should be his final attempt. I'm sure that he can at most reach the 200th step. He definitely won't surpass it. That's about it. Perhaps it'll be difficult for him to even reach the 190th step. After all, it's midnight now. Besides, the higher we go, the stronger the pressure. As the discussions continued, countless gazes fell on the rankings on the statues. Some of those gazes were cold, some were disdainful, some were expectant, some were envious, and some were jealous. At that moment, Su Ming's entire body was surrounded by the moon as he walked towards the stairs before him. As he moved forward, the 53 blood veins on his body let out a brilliant red glow, and as he moved forward, the 54th blood vein also appeared on his body. Soon after, the 55th, 56th, 57th blood veins appeared at the same time, causing the blood light on Su Ming's body to become even stronger. It filled his body with a vast amount of power that was about to explode. With a low growl, Su Ming took a huge step forward. When he reached the 186th step, banging sounds came from his body once again as his blood veins increased. That sound made by Su, who was on the other path beside the fog, frown. It also made Chun Chong, who was listening from afar, grit his teeth in anger. He wanted nothing more than to let out the same sound from his body. 189, 192, 199, 200. The rankings on the statues in the field changed once again. First, Yi Wang, 600 steps. Second, by Su, 397 steps. Third, Chun Chong, 391 steps. 48th, Bei Ling, 206 steps. 49th, Si Kong, 201 steps. 50th, Mo Su, 200 steps. Chapter 60. 50th, Mo Su, 200 step. The row of words on the rankings on the eagle statues made the expressions of all those who saw it change drastically. It did not matter whether it was their previous disdain, their contempt, or the fact that they were just looking for fun to pass time. All of it seemed to have been swept away by a violent gust of wind and completely disappeared. No one thought that it was just a form of fun to pass time anymore. They had just witnessed a miracle. They had just witnessed an unbelievable rise to power. He rose from the last place and made it into the top 100, then into the top 50. Some of the tribe members in the field could not believe what they saw. They could not imagine that such a huge accident would happen so suddenly. In fact, Mo Su had made it to the top 50 from the last place without anyone else doing anything. His performance in the middle of the night was too shocking. That was why the hundreds of tribe members in the field had already forgotten about the glory of the top 10 and by Su, who was in second place. Their gazes were all attracted by Mo Su's name. How high can he get in the end? This person will definitely get into the top 30. That might not be the case. I think he's lacking in stamina. But no matter what, if he can get into the top 50, then it means that he's very strong. The sounds of discussions rose and fell, and the field was in an uproar. The night was supposed to be a quiet night, but now, it was unlike ever before. It was impossible for them to be quiet. In fact, it was even more lively than during the day. When Su Ming made it to the 50th place, not only did he receive the attention of the hundreds of people in the field, he also received the attention of the participants who were also in the mountain. Most of the people who were ranked after the 50th place were indignant towards the person who had suddenly surpassed them, but they were also respectful towards him. As for those who were ranked in the top 50, they were all staring at the plates in their hands and Su Ming's rank. To them, Su Ming had already become a threat. That threat may not be too great, but it was still enough for them to take him seriously. However, for those who were ranked in the top 10 or even the top 20, their attention was negligible. However, the people who were the most nervous at that moment were definitely Si Kong and Bei Ling. One of them was ranked 49th, and the other was ranked 48th. They felt as if there was something stuck in their throats towards the person ranked 50th. It was especially so for Si Kong. His face was pale as he clenched his fists tightly. As the son of the tribe leader of Dark Dragon Tribe, it was not easy for him to obtain this rank. He was originally quite pleased with himself, but now his heart was pounding against his chest. "I can't get up! I can't come up! I can't come up!" he kept shouting in his heart. His eyes were red as he stared at the ranking on the token in his hand. Bailing stood up on a small path further away from where he stood. He was also extremely nervous. His eyes were wide open as he stared at the plate. He did not scream in his heart like Seekong. Instead, he gritted his teeth, turned around, and walked resolutely towards the 207th step. Just as most of the people were looking at the ranking board, Su Ming stood on the 200th step and took a deep breath. His gaze was as determined as steel. The 58 blood veins on his body shone with a powerful light. If it was not for the fog around him, that light would have definitely shot into the sky. Even if they were far away, they would still be able to see it. Yet now, due to the presence of the fog, everything was buried deep within the mountain. Su Ming lifted his head and looked at the moon and the dark sky through the thin layer of fog above him. He did not know why, but ever since he started practicing the fire berserker art, he fell in love with the night. He did not dislike the light from the sky, but he did not look forward to it either. Among all the living beings on the land, who can see the end of the sky? Su Ming mumbled. He looked at the dark sky and a glint flashed briefly in his eyes, but it quickly disappeared from his eyes. If he did not look closely, it would be difficult to notice it. Su Ming lifted his right foot and walked forward. He landed on the 201st and 202nd steps. The moment his foot landed, Seekong stood up on one of the stairs that was further away from him. His face was ferocious, and he roared towards the sky before he also walked forward in a frenzy. He watched as his rank dropped from 49th to 50th. The difference of one rank was like the difference between heaven and earth. It was something the proud Seekong could not accept. It would have been fine if he had been suppressed from the start, but once he was lucky enough to gain the upper hand, he was suddenly suppressed. Seekong could not accept it. He gritted his teeth and ignored the strong pressure from the mountain under the moonlight. He roared as he walked forward. Bei Ling moved at the same time. In fact, their actions set off a chain reaction. The 47th, 46th, and 45th place all found it difficult to sit still, and they all stood up unwillingly and began to move. Their actions were like a stimulant to the hundreds of people in the field outside. They became excited and started discussing among themselves. Their voices did not stop. Seekong is moving. 202, 203, stop. Bei Ling can't sit still either. 207, 208, 210. Interesting. Mo Su, entering the top 50, immediately messed up the rankings. One of them will definitely fall out of the top 50. If that's the case, they can't help but be anxious. Just as the sounds of discussion rose, the crowd fell silent once again. The sounds of discussion turned into the sound of sharp inhales. Everyone's gazes were focused on one of the ranks that was rising madly. At that moment, even the old woman from Dark Dragon Tribe who had not been paying attention to the matter opened her eyes. She looked at the name that kept jumping up on the eagle statue beside her. Her expression remained the same, but it was difficult for others to know whether there were any changes in her thoughts. However, the tribe leader of Black Mountain Tribe did not even spare a glance at it. 49th place, Mo Su, 205 steps. 46th place, Mo Su, 213 steps. 42nd place, Mo Su, 221 steps. 39th place, Mo Su, 232 steps. 37th place, Mo Su, 239 steps. 34th place, Mo Su, 247 steps. Seekong stared at the rankings on the plate in his hand dumbfoundedly. His face was pale and his body trembled as if he had lost all his strength. He sat on the ground and gritted his teeth, but in the end, it turned into helplessness. He had only taken 2 steps before he could no longer withstand the pressure of the night. He had no choice but to stop. Bei Ling's face was bitter. He gave up on continuing. He did not have the extra strength to continue. The pressure of the night was not something he could withstand. The others also stopped moving. As they looked at Mo Su, who had risen from the 50th place to the 34th place in a breathtaking manner, a sense of helplessness rose in their hearts. Su Ming stood on the 247th step. This was not the upper half of the mountain. Compared to the seemingly endless number of steps, this was only a small part of the mountain. Yet even if it was only a small part of the mountain, when he stood there, it was as if he was standing in midair. There was no wind in this place, and because of the fog, it was difficult to see the outside world. Yet when Su Ming lifted his head and looked at the moon in the sky, he felt as if he was getting closer to her. Su Ming took a deep breath and lifted his foot. He stepped on the 248th step. The moment his foot landed, the blood veins on his body increased from 58 to 59. He lowered his head and looked at the blood veins on his body. A smile appeared on Su Ming's lips. He could clearly feel that the 248th step was the same as the previous two steps. There was a balance between them. There was still some time before dawn, but Su Ming gave up on moving forward. Instead, he sat down cross-legged on the 248th step and closed his eyes. He fused his mind with the circulation of his qi and slowly began controlling his qi with fine precision. Due to the increase in blood veins, the difficulty of controlling his qi also increased. Yet Su Ming was not in a hurry. He did not want to give up on this rare opportunity. Besides, the elder had told him those 6 numbers so that he could treasure this chance. As Su Ming meditated and controlled the circulation of his qi in his body, time passed by slowly. The people who had been paying attention to him after the 30th place in the mountain gradually changed from puzzlement to contemplation. As for the people before the 34th place, they gradually relaxed from their nervousness. The people in the field outside had different guesses and expectations towards Su Ming stopping once again. Just who is he? Which tribe does he belong to? Why is he moving forward at night? And why did he stop after he reached the 34th place? Is it because he has run out of stamina, or does he have other plans? Will he be able to maintain his rank in the end? Will he fall out of the top 50? Or will he get into the top 30, or even the top 20? Is there even a sliver of a possibility for him to get into the top 10? Many questions appeared in the hearts of the hundreds of tribe members in the field. As their discussions gradually faded away, these questions were buried in their hearts as they waited for the moment they obtained their answers. Of course, there were also quite a number of people who did not like Su Ming. They believed that Su Ming would stop moving forward. More importantly, once daylight arrived and the others started moving again, Su Ming's rank would definitely fall. Yet no matter what, even those who did not have high hopes for Su Ming had to admit that this night was different because of Mo Su's name. Because Mo Su's name would forever be remembered by the people. Even if many years passed by, they would not forget it. On this night, Mo Su's glory surpassed that of the top 10 and even surpassed Yi Wang's. It was destined that even after daylight arrived, Mo Su's name would still occasionally catch people's attention. No matter what their thoughts were, most of them had a hint of anticipation towards this name. There was still a smile on Mo Sang's lips as he looked at Su Ming's rank. He might not know why Su Ming would change so much during the night, but he understood that everyone had their own secrets. As a senior, he did not need to understand everything. He needed to protect them. Now, do you believe in what I said just now? For the first time, Mo Sang took the initiative to speak to Jing Nan. Jing Nan's expression remained the same, but when he looked at the rank, he frowned slightly. He became even more uncertain about Mo Sang's words regarding Su Ming's past. The night gradually passed by. The field fell into silence. Almost everyone fell silent. Perhaps they had different thoughts running through their minds, but their gazes were still fixed on Mo Su's row on the eagle statues. After a long time, a white glow appeared in the horizon. A new day had arrived. Chapter 61. It was the second day of the first stage of the test. Almost at the moment the first ray of sunlight shone on the black fog mountain that sealed the ancient berserker beasts, the pressure that had increased during the night faded away and the mountain returned to normal. Yi Wang was the first to move. He opened his eyes calmly, got up, and walked towards the 601st step. He did not know anything about what had happened the previous night. To him, who had always been prideful, he would not even bother to look at the plate. He still believed that no one else had the right to be his opponent. The only one who had the right was himself. Step by step, Yi Wang, with his fiery red robe, walked up the stairs with arrogance. There was a determination in his heart. In the first stage of the exam, he had to reach the 900th step. He clearly remembered that the last time he reached the 800th step when he was extremely exhausted and unable to take another step. In the instant when he was forced to give up, he lifted his head and seemed to see a strange stone statue at the peak of the mountain in the distance. Unfortunately, due to the distance, he couldn't see the appearance of the stone statue clearly. But with just a glance, Yi Wang became determined. In his heart, pride and being different from others had already fused into his bones. He wanted to see the peak of the mountain that others couldn't see. He longed to stand there, lower his head, and look at the people beneath him. He proudly walked further and further into the fog with his fiery red robe. Even though he didn't look at the ranking, he knew that he would definitely be first place. Chun Chong was gritting his teeth and mumbling under his breath as he walked up the stairs. He did not stop to rest even though he was panting. Instead, he frequently checked the plate in his hands to check Bai Su's ranking. Bai Su was still 3 steps ahead of him. The two of them looked as if they were going against each other, and they continuously compared themselves to each other. In truth, this had happened since yesterday, and Chun Chong felt indignant. Damn you! You should either walk faster and widen the distance between us so that I won't think about you, or walk slower. Aren't you tired now? If you're tired, then I'm tired too. Chun Chong was drenched in sweat. Even though it was daytime, he, who had climbed more than 400 steps, could feel the pressure coming from the top of the mountain. It was almost suffocating, and a sense of exhaustion washed over his body like a tide. Bai Su was panting harshly. Even though he had rested for a night, as he climbed higher and the pressure grew stronger, the arrogance in his heart was gradually suppressed. It was especially so when he saw Yi Wang, who was ranked first, still steadily climbing up the 600-something steps. He could not help but feel a hint of respect towards him. After losing the desire to fight for first place, he began to target Chun Chong, swearing to crush him beneath his feet. From his point of view, Chun Chong was his only worthy opponent. If he could completely suppress this person, even if he lost to Yi Wang in the first round, it would still be enough to make him famous. Especially now that the elder is... Bai Su smiled coldly, and a hint of anticipation and fantasy appeared in his eyes. Wu Sen's face was a little dejected. He had rested for a night, but not only did his condition not improve, as time passed by, the side effects of losing his blood of corpses started showing up. His face was dark as he walked forward. Occasionally, he would look at the ranking on the plate in his hands. Bai Su, who was ranked second, was filled with an unwillingness to admit defeat. He might still be ranked 12th, but Wu Sen knew that he no longer had any hope of getting into the top 10. The people in front of him were usually weaker than him in the tribe, but now Wu Sen sighed. Compared to them, Su Ming was much calmer. He did not continue climbing up the mountain. Instead, he sat down cross-legged on the 248th step and controlled the speed of the qi in his body in a fine manner, causing the 59 blood veins in his body to continuously decrease before increasing. He tried his best to use the balance pressure in the place so that the number of blood veins in his body would always be fixed at 1 blood vein, regardless of whether it was increasing or decreasing. To him, this fine control was very interesting. It was as if he was quenching and creating medicinal pills. However, this time, he was using his body as a barren cauldron, his qi as the flames, and his body as half of the herbs. He was controlling the strength of the flames to refine his body. As time passed by, the hundreds of people in the field outside looked at the ranks on the eagle statues and occasionally started discussing among themselves. There's no doubt that Yi Wang will be ranked first. He's already at the 680th step. No one can catch up to him. The second and third place will definitely be between Chun Chong and Bai Su. Look at how they're chasing after each other's ranks. They must be fighting against each other right now. It's a pity that something happened to Wu's senator. I don't know what happened to him. It's really incomprehensible. It's a pity that Mo Su hasn't moved since last night. It's already noon now. His rank is continuously being surpassed, and now he's only at the 47th place. As they discussed among themselves, a name that was ranked around the 100th place on the 9 eagle statues suddenly shone with a gray light. As it shone, the name instantly turned gray. The sudden change immediately caught the attention of the crowd, but they were not surprised. Someone gave up. A large number of abandoned people will appear on the second day of the first stage of the test. They don't have the strength to continue moving forward, and they can't withstand the pressure from the tall mountain. If they don't leave, they'll face the danger of being suppressed by their chi. The sky suddenly distorted at that moment, and soon after, a wisp of fog seeped through the air and charged towards the field. Once the fog dissipated, a young man in his 20s appeared. His face was pale, and once he landed on the ground, he staggered and almost lost his footing. It was clear that he had been forcefully sent out. As if he was extremely uncomfortable with the people's gazes gathered on him, he lowered his head and quickly walked to his tribe in the distance. He sat down quietly with a dejected look on his face. More people like this who gave up appeared in the afternoon. The names that had turned gray and the dark figures that appeared in the black fog from the distorted sky became the most captivating sight on the second day. Most of the people who gave up sighed and walked back to their respective tribes. There were quite a number of them who came from Windstream tribe. Those ranked below the 100th place have all given up. Just watch. By tonight, those ranked below the 50th place will definitely give up. When it's midnight, there will also be quite a number of people who will give up. After all, even if they don't move forward at midnight, they'll still be extremely tired. It'll be difficult for them to fight against the pressure that will increase during the night. The first stage of the test doesn't just focus on the rankings. It's also fun to watch those people who give up. Isn't that so? It's especially so for those who have pretty good rankings. Once they give up and return here, they'll look so nervous, as if they're afraid that someone will surpass them again. It's really interesting. As these discussions echoed in the field, someone suddenly looked at the eagle statues with excitement on his face. Emosu moved. The moment the words left his mouth, he instantly caught everyone's attention. Countless gazes were instantly gathered on the eagle statues in the row that belonged to Su Ming. Su Ming opened his eyes. After half a day of fine control, there were only 21 blood veins left in his body. He could no longer continue. Su Ming lifted his head and looked at the stairs in the fog before him. He stood up slowly. He did not know that he had already attracted a lot of attention. There were only two thoughts in his head. Besides using this place to train in fine control, he also had to not let the elder down. I'll try my best and give it my all. Su Ming was still a teenager. He had a teenager's drive and a teenager's refusal to admit defeat. A glint appeared in his eyes. He took a step forward and landed on the 249th step. A strong pressure came crashing down on him, causing Su Ming's body to tremble. What a strong pressure! Su Ming's face was slightly pale. He had a feeling that there was a ferocious beast roaring and pouncing on him from the path leading up the stairs. Determination appeared in Su Ming's eyes. As the pressure came crashing down on him, he circulated the qi in his body. 59 blood veins appeared on his body, and he took a step forward. 251, 255, 258. Su Ming took another 20-something steps in one breath. Only when he stood on the 270th step did he let out a sigh of relief. Sweat beaded on his forehead. Walking on the stairs during the day without any nourishment from the moonlight was slightly taxing for Su Ming. Yet the more it was so, the more determined he became. More importantly, as the pressure grew stronger and stronger, it crashed against the 59 blood veins in his body. Su Ming had a feeling that his blood veins were about to increase. He knew that this was because he had discovered the secret of those 6 numbers. Furthermore, he had continued to control the circulation of his qi and blood. Not only was his qi and blood under fine control, but he was also able to force out the potential in his body through fine control. It was especially so since he had obtained the Elder's true Berserker's awakening and the drop of Berserker blood from the Elder. As he continued to use fine control, he was forced down by the pressure coming from the top of the mountain and truly absorbed it. Su Ming gritted his teeth and lifted his feet once again. He continued moving upwards quickly. Muffled rumbling sounds reverberated in his body. As he moved forward, the 60th blood vein immediately appeared on his body. 61 blood veins, 62 blood veins. The moment Su Ming stepped on the 301st step, the 67th blood vein appeared on his body. The 67 blood veins surrounded Su Ming's entire body, giving him an indomitable strength. Even if he was drenched in sweat, his gaze was even more determined than before. Su Ming did not know just what sort of shock he brought to the hundreds of people in the field beneath him when he moved from the 248th step to the 301st step. The tribe leader of Black Mountain Tribe also looked over. A rarely seen serious expression appeared on his face. He took the 60th step again. This Mo Su is fine when he doesn't move, but when he does, it's shocking. Ha! I've been waiting for him to move. He didn't disappoint me. Mo Su, get into the top 30. It'd be best if he could get into the top 10. He hasn't changed for the entire day. Even if he moves now, his rank will only be 36th. It's not as good as yesterday. The person who was talking with jealousy and pretending to be disdainful suddenly widened his eyes and swallowed the words he was about to say. Chapter 62. He was not the only one who swallowed the words he was about to say. At that moment, the hundreds of spectating tribe members in the field, and those who gave up on the competition and returned to the field with a gloomy look widened their eyes. Shock could be seen in their eyes. Some people had already subconsciously stood up from their cross-legged positions, while others unconsciously took a few steps forward from a position slightly further away from the statue, as if they wanted to take a closer look. The eyes of the old woman from Dark Dragon Tribe were also shining brightly. There was a strange glint in her eyes as she stared at the eagle statue not too far away. She stared at Mo Su's ranking on it. More tribe leaders who came to the field focused their attention on the eagle statue. Their faces were solemn. The head of the guards of Dark Mountain Tribe, Bei Ling's father, was staring at the ranking on the eagle statue. Most of the time, he was looking at Bei Ling's ranking. At that moment, he ignored his son and stared at Mo Su's name. He stared at the number of steps behind him, which was increasing at a shocking speed. The entire field fell into dead silence at that moment. 36th, Mo Su, 301 steps. 34th, Mo Su, 310 steps. 31st, Mo Su, 322 steps. 28th, Mo Su, 335 steps. 26th, Mo Su, 344 steps. 23rd, Mo Su, 351 steps. 19th, Mo Su, 371 steps. After a while, Mo Su's name remained at 19th place at the 371st step. Only then did the sound of people sucking in breaths come from the field. This scene made most of the people who saw it feel incredulous. Even if they had experienced the miracle from last night, the changes now were too great compared to last night. If last night was a miracle, then right now, only the word legend could be used to describe this unbelievable scene. In less than 60 breaths, he went from 248 steps to 371 steps. This is 120-something steps, and he used less than 60 breaths. Wu Sun can't do it. Qin Chong can't do it either. Even Yi Wan used more than 2 hours to walk up these 100-something steps. Who is this Mo Su? Amidst the sounds of people sucking in breaths, the field burst into an uproar. The level of excitement far surpassed what it was before and even surpassed what happened last night. And this is only the afternoon. If it's dusk, if it's night, with how powerful this person was last night, how many steps can he walk? What kind of ranking will he get in the end? Top 10. This person is definitely in the top 10. In the crowd, there were those who were jealous, but there were still many who were nobodies in the tribe. Whether it was Chun Chong, Wu Sun, or the top 10, top 20, or even the top 30 or 40, in their eyes, they were all proud and aloof sons that they needed to look up to, and even more so, they longed to interact with from the bottom of their hearts. But at the same time, they also felt unwilling and helpless. Today, they had personally witnessed the rise of a person who was in last place yesterday. With indescribable momentum and speed, he had risen from last place to fight his way to 19th place. It was precisely because they saw it with their own eyes that they were so excited. It was as if Mo Su was themselves. However, human nature was complicated. There would definitely not be a single change in them. In the midst of their excitement, there were also complicated emotions and envy. When these emotions were mixed together, they turned into an emotion that even they themselves could not describe. They hoped that Su Ming could rise to power because it would satisfy their desires. But they were also deeply envious of him for being able to climb up from being a nobody. They wanted him to be like them forever, to sink into the bottom of society. Top 10? I don't think so. He's just lucky. He might have used some despicable method to get to where he is now. That's right. Look, he has to rest for a long time after every step he takes. If you ask me, this must be where his secret lies. The discussions in the crowd were filled with conflicting emotions. Perhaps they were excited just a moment ago, but now they were filled with envy. However, at that moment, there was an old man with a protruding mouth and cheeks like a monkey in the crowd. That old man's eyes were moving about, and no one knew what he was thinking. Occasionally, he would approach some of the people who were discussing and pull one of them out. Once that person looked at him with dissatisfaction, he would lower his head and whisper a few words into their ears. Then, he would quickly open his sleeves and hide them, afraid that too many people would see him. All the people who were pulled out by the old man would usually have surprised expressions on their faces, as if they could not believe what they were seeing. However, no one knew what the old man said, but most of them were still skeptical. There were some people who were brought further away by the old man, as if they were about to start a trade. Compared to the hundreds of people in the field, the people from the various races who were participating in the competition in the mountain also had complicated expressions on their faces. Most of them looked at the plate in their hands, at the name that had entered their sights since the previous night. They could not describe what they were feeling. There was envy, jealousy, and perhaps disbelief. Lei Chen averted his gaze from the plate in his hands, and a foolish smile appeared on his lips. However, there was uncertainty in his eyes. As he walked forward slowly, he was still wondering whether this Mo Su was Su Ming. Ever since he saw Mo Su's name, Su Ming's face immediately appeared in his head. Yet now, as he watched Mo Su's rank rise higher and higher until he reached the 19th place, Lei Chen was shocked, but at the same time, he became even more uncertain. Perhaps it's not him. Bei Ling was drenched in sweat. He looked at the rank on the plate and watched the person called Mo Su rise to power. He shook his head and sighed softly. This person is really good at hiding. From now on, his name will definitely be famous. But this has nothing to do with me. He's not from Dark Mountain Tribe either. But there's a Su in his name. I hate that word. Bei Ling lowered his head and walked forward slowly. There was also Si Kong, who was standing on the stairs in the distance. He naturally no longer paid any attention to the rising Mo Su. To him, Mo Su had already surpassed many people. He was not someone he could compare to. He was more concerned about Bei Ling, who was ranked ahead of him. I have to get into the top 50. Si Kong clenched his fists and gritted his teeth as he walked forward. It was the first time Bei Ling looked at the rank on the plate for such a long time. She looked at Mo Su's name, and just like Lei Chen, she hesitated. Is it him? Bei Ling smiled bitterly and shook her head. She knew that Su Ming was a berserker and had some power, but she did not think that Su Ming was the Mo Su who was like a prodigy. Compared to these people, the one who was truly nervous was not Yi Wang, who did not know anything about this and would not care even if he knew. It was also not Qin Chong and Bai Su, who were in a stalemate with each other and would not stop until a victor was determined. It was Wu Sun. Wu Sun was nervous. He looked at Mo Su's name that had suddenly shot up to the 19th place on the plate. His face was incredibly dark. He was a little uncertain as to who should be the main suspect between Bai Su and Mo Su. However, this wasn't the source of his nervousness. What he was nervous about was being surpassed by an outsider. But if he was surpassed by two outsiders at the same time, then he wouldn't be able to bear the humiliation he would suffer. Damn it! Wu Sun let out a ferocious growl. He gritted his teeth, and even though his face was pale, he walked forward madly. There seemed to be a voice roaring in his head, telling him that he could not be surpassed again. Everyone in the top 20 was working hard. Su Ming's entry instantly changed the situation of the top 20. He was like a stone thrown into the water. At the same time he stirred up ripples, he also shocked the fish in the water. Fortunately, the source of their fear was the fact that Mo Su, who was ranked 19th, had stopped at the 371st step. Even after a long time had passed, he didn't move in the slightest. Only then did they heave sighs of relief and quickly climb, as if they wanted to use this opportunity to increase the distance between them. They were afraid. They were afraid of Mo Su's strange actions. They were afraid of the shocking changes that would occur when he did not move. It was the first time they paid so much attention to this person. Even as they moved forward, they would occasionally look at the ranking board to see whether this person moved again. In fact, they were very nervous. They had a feeling that when this person moved again, he would be like thunder, and there was a high possibility that he would get into the top 10. Su Ming sat cross-legged on the 371st step. He might have guessed that a lot of people were paying attention to him, but he did not know that the name he used, Mo Su, had already stirred up a storm in the first stage of the test. Besides Yi Wang, there was no one who did not know this name. In fact, most of the people's gazes towards the top 10 had lessened. Instead, they were paying attention to Su Ming's ranking, waiting for him to explode again. Su Ming's expression was calm. He closed his eyes and circulated the blood veins in his body. There were no longer 67 veins, but 71 veins. 71 blood veins surrounded his body and shone with a red light. When the veins disappeared one by one, they would regenerate. Under Su Ming's fine control, not only did he force out his potential, he also refined his body, causing the power he could control to become stronger. It made him look forward to the speed he would be able to reach if he used all his strength. After all, Su Ming's forte was speed. Time passed by. Very soon it was dusk. During the entire afternoon, fog would occasionally appear in the field. The people who had given up on the test walked out one by one. Their expressions gradually changed. The higher their ranks were, the less gloomy they looked when they walked out. Some of them even looked excited. When dusk arrived, the sky began to darken. Almost all the names on the 9 eagle statues after 60 had turned gray. Only 2 of them were still standing. 67th, Wu La, 159 steps. 61st, Bai Ling, 178 steps. Chapter 63. It was a pity that Wu La and Bai Ling's perseverance turned gray once dusk was over and the moon in the sky started to show its bud. Almost at the same time, as the world in the distance distorted, 2 wisps of black fog appeared out of thin air and charged towards the field before dispersing to reveal 2 pale women. Bai Ling was calm. She had already tried her best. In truth, when she did not see Su Ming during the test, she had already lost the will to compete. Now that she had returned, under the gazes of the hundreds of people around her, Bai Ling lowered her head and walked towards her tribe. Without a single word, she sat down cross-legged behind the old woman and looked at the ranking on the eagle statue beside her. She looked at Mo Su's name and bit her lip. No one knew what she was thinking about. The old woman beside her seemed to be whispering something to her, but Bai Ling did not seem to hear it. She did not speak either. Compared to Bai Ling's calmness, Wu La was very indignant. She walked quietly towards Dark Mountain Tribe. What welcomed her was the kind smile and comfort from the head of the guards. Wu La, this is already very good. This is your first time participating in the first stage of the test, and you're already in the top 70. When you go back, train well. Next time, try to get into the top 50. Wu La nodded her head lightly. She may be indignant, but there was a sense of pride in her heart. She also felt that her results were pretty good. It was just as the head of the guards had said. This was the first time she had gotten such a ranking, and it was already outstanding enough. Lifting her head, Wu La looked at the ranking on the eagle statue. She looked at Bai Ling, who was ranked 49th, Lei Chun, who was ranked 53rd, and then at Mo Su. When she saw Mo Su's name, her eyes lit up. Who could he be? The flow of time was sometimes very slow. However, in this intense first round of the competition, It caused everyone to unknowingly pass by very quickly. In the blink of an eye, the bright moon in the sky was no longer a crescent moon. Instead, it had become increasingly brighter as it hung high in the sky. It was not too far away from midnight. The pressure in the mountain gradually became stronger. Lei Chen gave up. He ended up at the 52nd place. As the fog appeared on the field, his expression did not turn gloomy. There was still a silly smile on his face. Once he walked out, there were quite a number of people who greeted him. It was clear that Lei Chen had made quite a number of friends during the time Dark Mountain Tribe came to Windstream Tribe. When he returned to where Dark Mountain Tribe was, Bei Ling and Si Kong both gave up and followed the black fog. Bei Ling was still as arrogant as ever. He was ranked 49th. He had fulfilled his wish of entering the top 50. This time it was different from a few years ago. A few years ago, he had only managed to enter with Wu Sen's help, but this time he had relied on himself. Bei Ling believed that if he had not given Wu Sen a large amount of blood from the center of his brows a few days ago, his ranking might have been a few more places higher. He had enough pride to walk towards Dark Mountain Tribe. Wu La, you did well. You might not have made it into the top 50, but this ranking is already very good. But don't be complacent. There are still 2 more stages. Bei Ling looked at Wu La and spoke slowly. Wu Long quickly stood up and nodded her head lightly. There was respect in her eyes as she looked at Bei Ling. She had personally participated in the test this time, so she knew just how difficult it was to make it into the top 50. As for you, Lei Chen, you should be able to make it into the top 50. You're now ranked 52nd. Oh well, you must work hard during the second stage. There are only 3 of us from Dark Mountain Tribe participating in the test. We must give it our all. Bei Ling looked at Lei Chen and spoke calmly. Lei Chen lowered his head and did not speak. In the distance, Si Kong returned with a dejected look on his face. In the end, he was still ranked 50th. He walked back to his tribe dejectedly and cast a glance at Bei Ling, who was standing quietly by his side. He was about to speak, but when he saw Bei Ling's cold stare, he immediately swallowed his words. As time passed by, the people who were ranked in the top 50 gradually gave up. As the names turned gray and more people returned to the field, the place slowly became livelier. When the people who were ranked in the top 50 returned, they would usually look incredibly pleased with themselves. There would also be quite a number of people who would rush forward to congratulate them, which would bring about waves of proud laughter. Some people gave up, but there were also some who persevered. At that moment, Chen Chong was gritting his teeth and persevering madly. His entire body was drenched in sweat, and the muscles on his face trembled continuously as he continued walking up the mountain stairs. He was already panting heavily. It was as if there were countless stars circling his eyes, making him so tired that he almost could not take it anymore. Yet at the same time, his mumbling did not stop. Damn it, I'm so tired. 537. You damn Bai Su. 538. You damn Bai Su. 539. You damn Bai Su. I'll fight you to the end. I'm not done with you. Chen Chong wiped off his sweat, and a crazed look appeared on his face. His mumbling grew louder. Are you crazy? Why do you have to compete with me? Damn you, Bai Su. If I really die from exhaustion, I'll haunt you even if I become a ghost. 538. That's not much, it's 539. Chen Chong's face was bitter. In his madness, he panted like thunder. He even used his hands and feet to crawl forward while facing the increasingly stronger pressure. His heart pounded against his chest as if it was about to explode. He was sweating so much that the stairs behind him could be seen covered in sweat. I'm going to die from exhaustion. Are you trying to die from exhaustion? I'm so sweaty. I've become thinner this time. I must have become thinner. Chen Chong panted continuously. As he crawled forward, his ears suddenly twitched, and he listened carefully for a while before he immediately started laughing. I'm going to die from exhaustion. How dare you compete with me? I'm going to die from exhaustion. You damned Bai Su. He was born with extraordinary ears, and he heard panting that was not any weaker than his own coming from one of the stairs that was located further away from him. Bai Su was also in a pathetic state. Sweat continued dripping down his face, and there seemed to be fire burning in his eyes. He had been fighting against Chun Chong for a long time, and at that moment, he gritted his teeth and crawled forward madly. He was so tired that he could feel a sharp pain in his chest when he panted, but he still did not want to give up. Chun Chong, I'll definitely surpass you. Other than Yi Wang, I'm the strongest among my peers. However, the higher they went, especially after they reached the 500th step, the more terrifying the pressure became due to the night. Chun Chong and Bai Su might have been able to handle it during the day, but now that it was almost midnight, even if it was difficult for them to even move, they were almost at the same level. Besides the two of them, the others who were still persevering were in the same state. It was especially so for Wu Sun, who continued moving forward with gritted teeth. He did not want to be surpassed again. Even if he could not get into the top 10, he had to keep his 12th place. Night was about to arrive, and the pressure from the mountain was about to reach its peak. Some people had already started to stop. After all, based on the usual practice of the first stage of the test, the final battle would be held the next morning. The moment midnight arrived, Chun Chong shuddered. He could clearly feel the pressure from the top of the mountain reaching a terrifying level. 547. 500. Darn it, I'm not going anymore. Bai Su, if you want second place, I'll give it to you. If I continue, I'll really die of exhaustion here. My body. Chun Chong sat on the ground and roared at the people around him. If I'm third, I'll be third. It's fine. As long as I don't fall out of the top 3, I won't embarrass myself. After all, Wu Sun is behind me. Bai Su, if you have the ability, then go. Take a few more steps and you'll die of exhaustion. Darn it, if I had Mo Su's abilities and could also reach a breakthrough, then I'll definitely. Chun Chong panted harshly and fanned himself with his hands. As he mumbled, he suddenly shuddered and perked up his ears. His expression was gradually replaced by shock. Bai Su looked at the ranking on the plate. When he saw that Chun Chong's number had stopped moving, he threw his head back and laughed. There was a ruthless look in his eyes. I'm the strongest besides Yi Wang. As his breathing quickened, he gritted his teeth and walked up a few more steps. When he stood on the 553rd step, he stopped and looked at the plate. Just as he was feeling pleased with himself, his expression froze. He saw Mo Su, who had fallen to the 21st place move. Wu Sun and all the other people in the top 20 besides Yi Wang noticed the change at the same time. They saw Mo Su move one after another. At the same time, a storm that seemed like it was about to sweep through the sky and earth rose up in the field outside. All the people in the field, the old woman from Dark Mountain Tribe, the leaders of the other tribes, and even the tribe leader of Black Mountain Tribe, who had never looked at the plate, immediately looked over. Numerous gazes fell on Lei Chun, Wu La, Bai Ling, Si Kong, Bei Ling, and all the participants ranked below 20 who had given up on continuing the test. All of them stopped breathing and looked at the same name on the 9 eagle statues. Mo Sang's eyes were bright as he stared at the ranking on the eagle statues. The light in his eyes was incredibly bright. Jing Nan, who was by his side, was no longer calm. His pupil shrank and he looked over. Su Ming moved. In the middle of the night, bathed in the moonlight, he slowly stood up. He had already controlled the blood veins in his body with fine control. Once there were only 15 blood veins left, he scattered them. As he lifted his head and looked at the moon in the sky, the red shadow of the moon slowly appeared in Su Ming's eyes. His hair was tied up by the grass rope, and it moved without wind under the moonlight. Su Ming sucked in a deep breath and lifted his right hand to remove the grass rope, causing his hair to fall down. Then he lifted his right foot and landed on the 372nd step. The moment his foot landed, all the blood veins in Su Ming's body erupted forth. It was also the first time he used his fastest speed in this place. Blood-red light scattered in all directions. Su Ming was like a bloody shadow as he charged forward in an instant. 372 steps, 393 steps, 424 steps, 448 steps, 471 steps. His speed was so quick that it was as if a storm had swept through the area under the moonlight. It made all the people who were paying attention to this, be it in the mountains or in the field below, fall silent. Chapter 64. They had to remain silent, because all of this was just the beginning. There were less than 20 people left in the mountain on the 9 eagle statues, and Su Ming's name on the plates in their hands was rising madly at a terrifying speed. 20th place, 19th place, 17th place, 15th place, 14th place, 12th place, 10th place. The moment he reached the 10th place, his name changed once again, and he became the 9th place. Wu Sun stood there in a daze. He stood on the 457th step, staring blankly at the ranking on the badge in his hand. He did not dare to believe his own eyes. Even though he had already predicted that the person called Mo Su would definitely be shocking once he made a move, he had never imagined that the degree of shock would be so terrifying. In an instant, Wu Sun went from 12th place to 13th place. He did not even have the chance to react, did not even have the slightest chance to fight back or struggle. He was not the only one who was stunned. Besides him, all the people from the 10th place to the 20th place had their names changed in an instant. That change made them feel powerless. They did not even have the time to think about fighting back. All that was left was admiration and shock. Wu Sun let out a low growl. Veins popped up on his face as he gritted his teeth and charged forward madly. He could not accept this. As he moved, all the people whose names were lower than Su Ming's stood up from their resting and chased after him with gritted teeth. Those who could enter the top 20 were definitely not ordinary people. Their pride did not allow them to give up so easily. At that moment, they did not care about the increasing pressure in the night, and all of them moved. Even Chen Chong, who was resting on the 547th step, shuddered. He looked at the plate in his hands with a dumbfounded expression and sucked in a sharp breath. He could hear the muffled rumbling sound in his ears just now. That was the sound of blood veins increasing. It was the sound he had longed for and envied previously. Bai Su, who was resting on the 553rd step, felt it even more clearly. There was only a thick layer of fog separating him from Su Ming's path. He could hear the muffled rumbling sound clearly. He could also feel Mo Su's crazed and terrifying speed on the path next to his. The two of them were not the only ones who were nervous. At that moment, the 5 people ranked from the 4th to the 8th were the most nervous. These 5 people were all from Windstream tribe. They might not be as famous as Chun Chong and Wu Sun, but they were still extraordinary people. But at that moment, their nervousness caused their hearts to beat faster. One by one, they stood up from their rest and immediately began climbing again. But it was night. It was the middle of the night. The pressure in Windstream Mountain was at its strongest. The resistance they faced as they climbed up the mountain was incredibly strong. The feeling of being pressed down by the might of heaven was enough to make a person break down. That was especially true when everyone rose to their feet. Before they could even take a few steps forward, the shock in their eyes when they looked at the rankings on their medallions turned into astonishment. One by one, they stopped in their tracks. Su Ming's long hair danced in the air. Without the grass rope tying him up, his hair moved without wind. His eyes were bloodshot, and there was a moon burning within them. He did not stop for even a moment. Once he reached the 471st step, booming sounds came from all over his body. His blood veins increased one by one. He did not even bother to check how many blood veins he had gained. Instead, he lifted his foot and took another step forward. The pressure from the top of the mountain fell on his body. It was as if there were countless mountains pressing down on him. Su Ming's entire body could not withstand it. The qi in his body circulated rapidly. Moonlight surrounded his body, and under the pressure, he continued moving forward. 472, 483, 494, 560, 523, 537, 546. When Su Ming stood on the 546th step, he finally stopped. His entire body was drenched in sweat, and his breathing was rapid. Yet there was still determination in his eyes. Booming sounds came from his body. As he stopped, the 87 blood veins rose abruptly and scattered around his body, turning into a powerful presence that enveloped Su Ming's entire body. 4th, Mo Su, 546 steps. There were only 3 people in front of him. Behind him were all the other candidates who were participating in the first stage of the test. He might not be able to look down on all the mountains, much less climb to the top, but at that moment, Su Ming was still standing at the peak. At that moment, Chen Chong shuddered. He might not be able to see Su Ming, but he could feel a presence crashing into his face from the plate in his hand. He could also hear the booming sounds that shocked him to his core. He could not see the person, but he had a feeling that this person was even more frightening than Bai Su. Perhaps it was precisely because he could not see the person, and because he was so mysterious that Chen Chong felt a rare hint of wariness in his heart. Chen Chong might have seemed to be an easygoing person, but in truth, he still had his pride in his heart. He could look down on Bai Su and give up because he was too tired. His personality dictated that he did not want to fight too much. There was no need for him to tire himself out. But the main reason was that Bai Su was not his opponent. So, what if he surpassed him? He did not have that presence that made people tremble. Everything was pale. In Chen Chong's eyes, among all the people he had seen, only Yi Wang had that presence. Yet now, he discovered to his shock that he could feel the presence that only Yi Wang had from Mo Su's name. Chen Chong's expression became serious. He no longer mumbled. Instead, the presence of a powerful berserker gradually appeared on his body. He stood up and looked into the depths of the fog. He could vaguely see a person standing coldly on the 546th step of one of the stairs. That person had his head lifted and was looking at the sky. There was an oppressive presence coming from that person that made Chen Chong pay great attention to it. Compared to Chen Chong, Bai Su could not compare in this aspect. His face was ferocious and filled with ruthlessness as he glared at the fog. He could even feel the faint sounds of breathing coming from the person behind the fog. No matter who you are, it's impossible for you to surpass me. Bai Su roared at the fog. His voice fused with the fog and gradually spread out. At that moment, the person from Windstream Tribe who was ranked last on the mountain chose to give up after a moment of silence. He chose to leave. He knew that the first stage of the test did not need to wait for the sun to rise. It was already the final battle. However, he could not participate in this battle. The mountain only belonged to a limited number of people. He did not want to be a supporting character. Instead of staying, it was better for him to leave. He knew his limits and knew when to advance and when to retreat. This might not be common among many people, but most of the prodigies who were ranked in the top 20 knew this. Most of the powerful berserkers respected each other, even if they were not from the same tribe. As this person left, besides Wu Sun and the other two people who were ranked fourth, the others gradually chose to give up. They left this place for the four people who stood at the top. They left it for them to fight. Wu Sun struggled for a moment before he let out a long sigh and also chose to leave. The other two people seemed to be unwilling to give up. As they hesitated, when they saw that the others had already left, they also chose to give up. As the wisps of black fog appeared in the quiet field in the middle of the night, no one looked at them. At that moment, all the people in the field were looking at the ranks on the eagle statue. Their breathing quickened. The old woman from Dark Dragon Tribe had already stood up with a grave expression on her face. The strong man beside her was the same. They were not the only ones. All the people from the other tribes were doing the same. No one continued sitting. Even the tribe leader of Black Mountain Tribe had a dark expression on his face as he stared at the ranks on the eagle statue. Bei Ling, Si Kong Bai Ling, Lei Chen, Wu La, and all the others were looking at the ranks in silence. Even the prodigies who had returned to the field did not mind that their return was not valued. They looked at the eagle statue and at the 4 rows of names that were lit up while most of the names had turned gray. Mo Sang was also looking at the names intently. Jing Nan, who was by his side, did not reveal any of his thoughts. He was also looking at the names. Su Ming stood on the 546th step and sucked in a deep breath. The pressure here was incredibly strong, and it was difficult for him to move as quickly as before. He lifted his foot and walked up to the 547th step, then walked up the stairs one step at a time. His footsteps were not quick, but they were steady. Faint roars traveled into his ears from the fog beside him. It was as if someone was saying something, but he did not listen carefully. Instead, He continued walking up the steps. Chun Chong's face was grave. He no longer mumbled under his breath. Neither did he look at the ranks on the plate. Instead, he tore off his clothes to reveal his slightly thicker upper body and walked up the steps with a serious look on his face. As for Bai Su, his face was incredibly ferocious. He gritted his teeth and withstood the strong pressure and the pain that seemed to be coming from his body as he walked up the steps. As he walked up the first step, he continued staring at the ranks on the plate. First, Yi Wang, 791 steps. Second, Bai Su, 554 steps. Third, Chun Chong, 548 steps. Fourth, Mo Su, 547 steps. Among the four of them, only Bai Su was still looking at the ranks. The other three did not. Yuan did not care about any changes. He had always thought that he was his only opponent. Chun Chong, on the other hand, had his own pride. He could vaguely feel Su Ming's presence, which made him regard him highly. That was why he did not look at the ranks, afraid that it would mess up his mind. Su Ming did not look at it either. He only walked towards the stairs. With each step he took, his body would tremble, and a large amount of sweat would break out on his body. He could feel the incredibly powerful pressure, but the determination within him and the indescribable determination within him caused him to be like a small tree in the face of a violent gust of wind. He struggled and did not fall under that pressure. Among all the living beings on the land, who can see the end of the sky? Su Ming looked at the sky and mumbled as he walked. Chapter 65. The bright moon hung high up in the sky. The moon today seemed a little different than usual. There were no clouds in the sky, causing the moon to look very bright. As the moonlight shone on the ground, it was as if a soft curtain had been lifted between the sky and the earth. From the distance, it looked beautiful, but on the mountain that towered into the clouds and whose peak could not be seen, the moon looked terrifying. Under the moonlight, the pressure from the mountain continued erupting forth at a terrifying speed, turning into an invisible windstorm that distorted the entire mountain. Even if a person lifted their head from within the mountain, they would still see the distorted gazes of the people around them. It was now midnight. It was the time of the day when the moonlight shone the brightest. It was also the time when the pressure from the mountain reached its peak. Su Ming and the other two stood at the 500th step. If there was no fog on the mountain and someone looked up from below, they would be able to see that the three of them were practically standing at the end of the sky. It was as if they could touch the sky if they just lifted their hands. If they continued moving upwards from the 500th step, they would have already entered the sky. That was how Yuan was now. He did not know what was happening outside. Neither did he know that there were three people fighting behind him. He only walked his own path, one step at a time, panting harshly as he moved forward slowly. Today, I'll get to 803 steps. Yuan gritted his teeth and walked forward with a pride that could burn other people's eyes. Under this pressure, no one would be able to take more than a dozen steps if they did not have that determination. Bai Su was determined, but there was also a lack of confidence in his determination. Or else he would not have looked at the ranking on the plate with every step he took. 556, 557. Damn it, Chun Chong has surpassed me. He's at 558. Bai Su's face was filled with unwillingness. He gritted his teeth and took another step forward, but the moment his foot landed, his entire body trembled. He seemed to have heard a faint roar coming from the highest point of the mountain. That roar was not something a human could make. It belonged to a beast. As the roar reverberated in the air, Bai Su trembled. He felt a sharp pain in his chest and coughed out a mouthful of blood. His body swayed, and he nearly fell down. His face was pale. During that instant, he felt as if the entire mountain had turned into a strange beast that he could not see and was pouncing on him with its mouth wide open. Chun Chong also sensed what was happening. He stood on the 558th step and was just about to take another step when a violent tremor ran through his body. He looked up, his eyes bloodshot, and blood seeped out of the corners of his mouth. Su Ming's entire body was drenched in sweat, but the determination in his eyes did not diminish. Instead, it became stronger. He took another step forward. 548, 549. When he stood on the 557th step, he also heard the faint roar. That roar was filled with a monstrous resentment. It charged towards Su Ming with a bang, and the instant it landed on his body, he froze. Sharp pain instantly shot through his chest, and he coughed up a mouthful of blood uncontrollably. There was a mighty pressure contained within that roar, and it seemed to want all those who heard it to submit to it. Yet right at the moment his blood seemed to have dyed the area before him red, an incredibly powerful light erupted forth from the blood-red moon in Su Ming's eyes, and it started burning. He would not surrender. Su Ming lifted his head instinctively and let out a loud roar towards the top of the mountain. His roar was like thunder. As it reverberated through the area, Su Ming's long hair danced in the air. The fire burning in his eyes looked as if it was about to spill out. He lifted his right foot and stomped down on the 558th step. The moment his foot landed, Su Ming trembled. Veins popped up on his skin, and blood veins filled his entire body. There was an indescribable pain in his veins, but Su Ming still did not give up. He wanted to move to the 563rd step. He wanted to continue find control there. He did not want to give up on this chance. He did not want to disappoint the elder. If Su Ming did not move, then it would be fine. But once he moved, he would make sure that he would have no regrets in the future. What he wanted to do was to have no regrets. He wanted to give it his all and fight without regrets. 559, 560, 561. Su Ming took another 3 steps forward. With each step he took, his body would tremble violently. His body would let out sounds that he could no longer bear with the pain. It was as if his flesh and bones were about to be crushed. That sort of pain was almost unbearable for a 16-year-old boy. 2 more steps. Just 2 more steps. Su Ming roared in his heart. He kept telling himself that he had to get to the 563rd step. Su Ming growled once again. He lifted his foot and took another step forward. The moment his foot landed, he felt as if the ground was shaking and the mountains were swaying. Yet in truth, he knew that it was not the ground that was moving, nor was it the mountains that were swaying. It was his body. The feeling of the earth shaking and the mountains swaying caused Su Ming's face to instantly turn pale. He lifted his head and looked at the sky. It was as if the entire sky was slowly moving in his eyes, and time seemed to have slowed down at that instant. Su Ming could feel his body slowly falling down. The ground did not move, the mountains did not shake. It was his body that could no longer bear with the pain. It had reached its limit and was slowly falling backwards. 562 is a hurdle. Su Ming's lips curled up in anguish. The ground doesn't move, the mountains don't shake, but if my body moves, nothing will change. Elder, why is it that when I'm running, the trees by my side seem to be moving? I'm a little confused. I don't know if my body is running or if the trees are moving back. Elder, what's going on? In Su Ming's anguish, he remembered a question he had asked his elder when he was young. Eyes can lie. La Su, when you grow up, you'll understand. What you see with your eyes might not be real. Perhaps your eyes are deceiving you. Look at that tree. Is it really moving? Is it your body that's moving? Or is it the tree that's moving? Or is it something else? Su Ming remembered that when he heard the answer, he was a little confused and unclear. Yet when he remembered it now, he was stunned for a moment. I can't change the ground. I can't change the mountains. Because my body is moving, everything is moving. But in truth, the ground isn't moving, the mountains aren't moving either. What's moving is... Su Ming widened his eyes. He felt as if he had grasped something. What's moving is my heart. When I ran when I was young, my body was moving. The trees were not moving, but my eyes saw the trees moving. That's also because of my heart. My heart was deceived by my eyes. It's my heart that's moving. The ground, the mountains, the trees, everything is fine. Even if my body moves, if my heart doesn't move, then everything will not move. Even my body might be deceiving me. My eyes, my body, everything can deceive my heart and make me feel like I'm moving. Su Ming shuddered. Once he understood this, a roar instantly rang in his head. The intensity of that roar made him feel dizzy. When that dizziness slowly disappeared, Su Ming was stunned. He lowered his head and looked at the steps beneath his feet, then looked at his surroundings. At that moment, he was still standing on the steps. His right foot was at the 562nd step, and his left foot was at the 561st step. His body had remained the same since the beginning. There was not a single hint of change. In silence, Su Ming lifted his left foot, and once he stood at the 562nd spot, he sucked in a deep breath, and understanding appeared in his eyes. I understand now. If my heart doesn't move, then nothing in the world will move. This is fine control. Su Ming mumbled and walked up to the 563rd step. As he stood there, a smile appeared on his pale face. He slowly sat down cross-legged and began the first time he truly entered fine control ever since he came to understand it. This time, it was completely different from the previous 4 times. Before this, he did it in a state of confusion. All his strength was used to control the speed of his qi. He used all his strength to control his qi. That was an external force. Now, after he understood it, he knew that the true state of fine control did not rely on external forces to change the speed of his qi, but on his heart. If his heart did not move, then his qi would not move. The moment Su Ming sat down, Bai Su let out an indignant roar. His right foot trembled and hung on the 562nd step, but no matter what, he could not put it down. He had a strong feeling that if he put his foot down, he would not be able to bear it. That feeling was incredibly strong, so real that he had to believe it. Slowly, with a pained expression, he chose to stop. He did not dare take the risk. Chen Chang's expression was one of seriousness that was rarely seen in his life. He stood at the 561st step and looked at the 562nd step in silence for a long time. He had heard of the story of this step before. After a long while, Chen Chang fiercely gritted his teeth and took a step forward. However, at the instant his foot landed, his entire body seemed to have frozen. He stood there in a daze, and his eyes were empty. Time passed by one breath after another. After 7 breaths of time, Chen Chang coughed out a large mouthful of blood and fell between the 561st and 562nd step. In the end, he was still unable to go up, and he didn't pass the step of refining his Tao heart. Yet compared to Bai Su, Chen Chang had a heart that could turn him into a powerful berserker. The field was in dead silence. There was no discussion, no uproar. Most of the people's breathing quickened as they looked at the ranks on the eagle statues. The shock in their hearts had already replaced all their thoughts. First place, Yi Wang, 803 steps. Second place, Mo Su, 563 steps. Those 2 rows of words attracted everyone's attention. Mo Su was a normal name. No one had heard of him before the test. But now, his name had spread far and wide. Time passed by slowly. This night was bound to be extraordinary. It was bound to be even more shocking than the day before. It was bound to be a battle that belonged only to the 2 people who stood at the top of the mountain. No one in the field became impatient. They waited quietly in silence, waiting for the moment the 2 people would move. When night passed, and there was still some time before dawn, the steps behind Mo Su's name on the 9 eagle statues moved. That move did not cause the weather to change. Neither did the wind and clouds to tumble backwards, but it turned into a windstorm that raged in the hearts of all those who were watching. Chapter 66. Su Ming opened his eyes. There were only 3 blood veins on his body. He lowered his head and looked at the 3 blood veins surrounding his chest, then stood up. He took a deep breath. He did not rush forward, but turned his head around to look at the thick fog. He could not see the bottom, but he could feel that he was standing at a very high place. I'll need to go to the 781st step for the last 3 blood veins. Su Ming looked at the top of the mountain, and his eyes gradually lit up. I also want to see just how far I can go. Su Ming lifted his foot and landed on the 564th step. Without any hesitation, he walked even higher up the stairs. Step by step, Su Ming did not erupt forth madly like before. In the span of a few breaths, he had taken more than 100 steps, but he did not stop for even a single moment of hesitation. Instead, he walked forward at a moderate pace with a hint of steadiness. His expression was calm. His entire person was as calm as an ancient well without any ripples. Slowly, gradually, he moved to the 573rd step, 578th step, 582nd step, and he continued. As he moved forward, all the blood veins on his body appeared. A strong presence of qi rose from his body. At the same time, as he moved forward steadily, another blood vein appeared. This path was Su Ming's path of becoming a powerful berserker. It was an incredibly important metamorphosis in his life. The transformation of his power and the epiphany of his soul. As Su Ming moved forward, each step he took turned into a change in the numbers on the statues in the field. Every time the numbers on the steps changed, the hearts of all those who were watching would jump. 597, 598, 599, 600. He's already at the 600th step. That was Yi Wang's limit yesterday. He's still moving. 601, 602. Didn't Yi Wang notice? He may be far away, but if he continues like this, he'll catch up to him before long. Due to Su Ming's actions, the quiet field was once again filled with discussions. However, compared to the uproar from before, the discussions this time were mostly in whispers. Compared to the crowd that had been watching the first stage of the great competition, there was another group of people in the plaza. They were the people who had ranked in the top 50. Amongst these people, especially those who had also entered the top 10, had formed a circle that belonged to them. Yi Wang is too arrogant. He has a habit of not looking at the ranking on the token. It's like this. Yi Wang always thought that he was his only opponent, and that no one else was qualified. Haha, I wonder if Mo Su will be qualified to be his opponent this time. He's already at the 635th step. Mo Su is indeed very powerful. His potential is so great that I can't compare to him. Actually, I hope that Yi Wang will take a look at the plate. I want to see how he will react if he finds out that Mo Su is behind him. Disdain? Or are you a little excited? The crowd in the square was divided into two different circles, each with different opinions. Compared to them, there was another group of people in the field that was of a higher level, and that was the leaders of each tribe. Their status and level of cultivation determined their views of the world. The old woman from Dark Dragon Tribe looked at Mo Su's name on the statue. A serious and concerned look appeared in her eyes. She could not think of who this person was, but she admired him. To her, it did not matter which tribe this person belonged to. He could not be from Windstream. If that was the case, then this person's appearance would be very interesting. It's a pity that this person isn't from Dark Dragon Tribe, or else I'd definitely help him train. The old woman sighed and looked at Bai Ling and Si Kong by her side. Si Kong isn't strong enough to take on such a great responsibility. Dark Dragon Tribe has fallen. As for Bai Ling, she only has a temporary liking for Su Ming. She can't tell the difference between kindness and affection. As long as that wild boy doesn't bother her, she'll forget about him as time passes. What right does this Su Ming have to get close to my granddaughter? Unless he's the mysterious Mo Su. The old woman laughed self-deprecatingly. There was a hint of mockery in her eyes. In the distance, the tribe leader of Black Mountain Tribe had a dark expression on his face. He stared at Mo Su's name on the statue. His gaze was cold, but there was also a hint of respect and shock in his eyes. Bai Su has been taught by the elder since he was young. His abilities far surpassed those of his generation. If it wasn't for the fact that the elder had reached a breakthrough and gained the same status as Windstream's Jingnan, he wouldn't have let Bai Su be exposed. But where did this Mo Su come from? Which tribe does he belong to? This sort of person must be in Black Mountain Tribe, or else we'll have to find a way to kill him. Jingnan's position in the field was the highest. He stood there and looked at the ranks on the statue. He watched as the number of steps behind Mo Su's name continued to increase. It was already at the 677th step. His pupils shrank, but he remained calm. It was as if this sort of thing was not enough to shock him. Mo sang, "Once Su Ming joins the test, let him stay in Windstream Tribe. We'll be able to provide him with better help here." Jingnan spoke slowly once he saw that the number of steps on the statue had increased to the 684th step. When he heard Jingnan's words, Mo Sang smiled faintly. He was also shocked by Su Ming's performance. This had already surpassed his expectations, but there was naturally a deeper meaning behind why he did not want Su Ming to think about revealing his power. "There's no hurry. We can talk about it after the test ends," Mo Sang spoke slowly. As he looked at Mo Su's name on the statue, a loving look appeared in his eyes. When he saw that Mo Sang did not reject him immediately, a glint appeared in Jingnan's eyes. With his intelligence, it was only natural that he could tell that the conditions he offered to Mo Sang were not good enough. If he can walk past the 750th step, then I'll give him the same treatment as the sons of the tribe leaders in Windstream Tribe. I'll give him the same treatment as Chun Chong and Wu Senator if he can walk past the 800th step. Then I'll give him the treatment of a berserker child. Jing Nan spoke slowly. What if he goes even higher? Mo Sang turned his head and looked at Jing Nan. Even higher? All right, if he can walk past the 850th step, then I'll give him the same treatment and help as Yi Wang. If he can walk past the 900th step and he agrees to join Windstream Tribe, then I'll make whoever transcends first between him and Yi Wang as a berserker child. Jingnan fell silent for a moment before he looked at Mo Sang and spoke slowly. He's already at the 700th step. Mo Sang smiled faintly. 700th step. Su Ming panted harshly. Sweat continuously dripped down his face as he stood on the 700th step. It was almost dawn and the moon was slightly dim. It was incredibly difficult for him to walk this far under the pressure. As he walked, a few more blood veins appeared on his body. However, Su Ming did not bother looking at how many there were. His only thought was to continue walking until he reached his limit. Su Ming calmed his breathing, then lifted his feet once again and walked towards the 701st step. At that moment, Yi Wang was sitting cross-legged on the 803rd step, unmoving. The entire mountain was quiet. The place he was at was completely different from Su Ming's. They were in two different directions. When dawn was about to arrive and the moon was starting to dim, as if dawn was not far away, Yi Wang opened his eyes and lifted his head to look at the sky. Once dawn arrives, I'll begin my final charge. This time, I'll do my best and walk to the 900th step. Yi Wang mumbled, and a confident smile appeared on his lips. There shouldn't be many people left on this mountain. If I'm not included, there shouldn't be more than 10 people left. I wonder if there are any who managed to walk past the 562nd step. But there shouldn't be any. There was a calm arrogance on Yi Wang's face. However, he fell silent for a moment before he chose to take out the plate and look at it. He had originally wanted to take a look at the remaining people. It was just an act of looking down on them while he waited for dawn to arrive. His expression was calm as his gaze fell on the plate. He looked at it once and averted his gaze. Yet the moment he averted his gaze, he was suddenly stunned and looked at the plate once again. Second, Mo Su. 716 steps. Mo Su. Walking at night is extremely stupid. Yi Wang was silent for a moment before he averted his gaze from the plate. He closed his eyes and continued meditating calmly, waiting for dawn to arrive. He did not seem to be anxious, but his eyelids would occasionally tremble slightly, revealing that it was difficult for him to truly calm down. Su Ming's breathing was rapid as he continued moving forward. His mind was blank. There was only a will pushing his body forward. As he continued moving forward, the number of blood veins in his body gradually increased. With each additional blood vein, he felt as if he had more energy to spare. As he moved forward madly, he walked past 725 steps, 738 steps, 751 steps, 763 steps, 779 steps. His body continued roaring, but his legs were trembling. His body swayed, especially his feet. It was as if they were glued to the mountain. Every single time he raised his feet, his body would feel sharp pain. Su Ming gritted his teeth and let out a low growl. He lifted his feet once again and walked to the 780th step. He was only one step away from his target, the 781st step. His eyes were bloodshot. That red was like fire, burning fiercely as if it wanted to burn Su Ming's entire body into ashes. When he saw that there was only one step left, Su Ming activated all the blood veins in his body and forced out a hint of strength. He lifted his feet and finally stepped on the 781st step. The moment his feet landed, his body seemed to be unable to withstand the pressure and was about to fall. Su Ming lifted his head and roared towards the sky. He had to step on this step. He lifted his right hand and bit down on his index finger. As blood flowed through the air, he placed his finger on his left eye. He wanted to perform the third burning of blood that he had yet to succeed in. The moment the blood on his index finger touched his left eye, the entire mountain moved as if the sky was falling and the earth was shattering. The roar of a wild beast reverberated through the black fog at the top of the mountain. On the 803rd step, Yi Wang, who had finally calmed down with great difficulty, suddenly trembled. He could hear the roar coming from the top of the mountain, and in that instant, he could feel the entire mountain shaking and rumbling. It was as if an unbelievable change had occurred. He opened his eyes, and his pupils shrank instinctively. He had a feeling that the sudden change in the mountain was related to the person called Mo Su. Without any hesitation, he immediately took out the plate and looked at it for the second time. When he saw the number 781 behind Mo Su's name, Yi Wang's expression changed, and he stood up from his cross-legged position. Chapter 67. Second, Mo Su, 781 steps. Yi Wang's expression was unprecedentedly serious. He had his pride. In fact, to him, there was no one who had the right to be his opponent. The person he wanted to compete against was himself. Yet at that moment, when the mountain rumbled and trembled, as if there was an unimaginably powerful presence surging forth from all directions, Yi Wang's heart wavered. He could not help but waver. He could not help but regard Mo Su as important. He stared at the plate in his hands. This was the first time he paid so much attention to a person on it. To him, this person far surpassed Wu Sun, surpassed Chen Chong, surpassed everyone else besides Yi Wang. Right then, he was only 20-something steps away from him. This distance created an oppressive and nervous feeling that Yi Wang had never felt before. Mo Su, do you think you have the right to be my opponent? There was a chilling glare in Yi Wang's eyes. All those who looked at him could feel the pride within that chilliness that no one could surpass. Yi Wang was arrogant. Ever since he was young, he had surpassed all his peers with his shocking potential. He had always stood at the top and even became the berserker son of Windstream tribe. His high status could be seen from the way he acted when others saw him. He did not need to form alliances. He did not need to be mysterious. He did not need to be the center of attention, because as long as he was there, he could naturally crush all the people who formed alliances with him. As long as he was there, he would be the brightest flag in the crowd. As long as he was there, his light could overshadow all the moons that were held up by the stars. He was Yi Wang. He looked down on all of his peers. Or perhaps it could be said that this wasn't contempt, but indifference, disregard. He was indifferent to all of his peers and disregarded everything. This was because he believed that no one had the qualifications to become an opponent that he had to take seriously. Yet now, Su Ming's appearance made Yi Wang feel like he had found his opponent for the first time. For the first time, he treated Su Ming seriously. Then let the two of us have a good competition. Yi Wang took a deep breath. His expression may have returned to normal, but his heart could not calm down. If he could really calm down, he could have waited until daylight before heading to the top of the mountain. This was his original plan. Yet now, due to Su Ming's appearance, this plan had changed. It was also the first time in Yi Wang's life that he had changed his mind because of someone from the same generation as him. With a wave of his sleeve, Yi Wang raised his foot. With a serious expression, he walked to the 804th step. When his foot landed, his body trembled and his breathing quickened. However, he did not stop for too long and continued walking. At that moment, Su Ming stood on the 781st step with his right hand trembling. The moment he smeared his blood on his left eye, he could feel the mountain trembling. He could also feel the strange presence that came from all directions when he was in Black Flame Mountain. Here, The presence was so strong that it could not be compared to the small black flame mountain. He had only smeared a little bit of blood on it, but the presence that erupted forth had already surpassed the entire amount of blood he had smeared on Black Flame Mountain the second time. The black fog on the entire mountain began to churn violently. The roar of a wild beast seemed to rise up from the top of the mountain, and it reverberated madly within the mountain. The roar caused the fog to churn even more violently, and it was as if the entire mountain was boiling in that instant. An invisible presence surged into Su Ming's body, causing his body to tremble violently. The feeling that he was about to explode appeared once again. The intensity of that feeling was similar to what Su Ming had felt when he attempted the third burning of his blood. Yet this time, the feeling was much stronger. It made blood trickle down the corner of his mouth. His right hand trembled, and he had to put it down. The moment he put his right hand down, the roars in the mountain stopped. The boiling fog instantly calmed down. The strange presence that came from all directions also disappeared in the blink of an eye. Everything returned to normal. It was as if the scene just now was just an illusion and had never happened. Su Ming panted harshly as he stood on the 781st step. He looked at the stairs above him, but he did not sit down cross-legged. Instead, he stood and closed his eyes, using the balance of the pressure on the last numbered step the elder had mentioned to train his body. At that moment, the field at the foot of the mountain was in an uproar. It stirred up a storm of discussions. Due to the seal, they could not sense the drastic change that had happened in the mountain just now. All they could see was the ranking on the 9 statues. They watched as the person called Mo Su climbed to the 781st step and was only 20 steps away from the first place Yuang. The shock that came from their hearts, the disbelief and astonishment that came from their eyes attacked their bodies, causing their minds to go blank at this moment. At the same time, they could only involuntarily let out cries of surprise. They also saw that Yuang had actually moved. Most of the hundreds of people in the crowd did not think too much about Yuang's action of returning to the top of the mountain from his rest. They only thought that Yuang should have moved because if they ran into something like this, they would also stand up from their rest and continue moving forward. However, the prodigies from Windstream Tribe, who were ranked in the top 50 in the field, were familiar with Yuang. Their understanding of Yuang was much greater than that of the others. The moment they saw the change in the number of steps behind Yuang, the shock in their hearts was much greater than that of those who did not understand. Yuang looked at the plate. He must have looked at the plate. With his personality, he would have ignored the plate once he saw it, but that in Mo Su is too shocking. Even Yi Wang couldn't remain calm. He changed his mind. Once Yi Wang decides on something, he won't change his mind easily. His original plan was to wait until tomorrow before he left, but now, because of Mo Su, he changed his mind. Wu Sun sat cross-legged in a corner far away. His face was pale as he stared at the row of words belonging to Mo Su on the eagle statue. He remained silent. He had previously suspected by Su, but at that moment he felt that the person called Mo Su was the real suspect, but this is just the first stage. This stage isn't a test of power, but potential. By the looks of it, it's not as if I can't get an answer from him. Wu Sun clenched his fists. There were also the leaders of the other tribes in the field. They were still staring at the eagle statue and the ranks on it. All sorts of thoughts were running through their minds, but the only thing that was similar was that they were all looking at Windstream as a joke. After all, in the past tests, forget the top 3, even the top 10 and top 30 had never appeared from other tribes. Yet now, not only were there 2 people from other tribes in the top 10, by the looks of it, the person called Mo Su also seemed to have the right to fight for the first place. This caused them to be shocked, but at the same time, they also smiled in their hearts. Mo Su, just which tribe did he come from? Why has such a person never appeared in Dark Dragon Tribe? If this person is willing to join Dark Dragon Tribe, then no matter what price I have to pay, we can still negotiate. The old woman from Dark Dragon Tribe sighed. She knew that it was impossible. Within Dark Mountain Tribe, the head of the guards had a shocked expression on his face. He let out a deep breath. He had the same thoughts as the old woman from Dark Mountain Tribe. Beside him, Bei Ling's eyes were filled with a hint of fanaticism as he stared at Mo Su's name. He had seen everything that happened during the first stage of the test. The strongest person he could come into contact with was Wu's senator, yet now he saw a stranger making his way to the second place and even having the right to fight for the first place. This made him incredibly excited. "This Mo Su is very strong," Bei Ling said in a low voice. "That's right. He's too strong. I just don't know which tribe he's from." "Ah, it's a pity he's not from Dark Mountain Tribe." Wu La's face was filled with respect. She admired powerful people, especially Mo Su. She had watched him rise to power step by step with her own eyes. She was completely immersed in the feeling of being there. "Don't you think that Mo Su's name sounds familiar?" Lei Chen hesitated for a moment. This was the first time he spoke since he returned. "Familiar? Lei Chen, what do you mean?" Wu Long was stunned and turned her head to look at him. "Perhaps I'm thinking too much. I think the elder's name is Mo Sang, and this person's name is Mo Su. No matter how I look at it, it feels like the elder's name and Su Ming's name are combined together." Lei Chen scratched his head, uncertainty on his face. "You're thinking too much." A hint of disdain flashed in Wu Long's eyes. She turned her head away and ignored him. Instead, she looked at the ranking on the eagle statue excitedly. "Mo Su, why aren't you moving?" "Yi Wang is already at the 827th step." Bei Ling did not speak, but the hint of disdain in his eyes showed what he thought of Lei Chen's words. Lei Chen was silent. Under the crowd's gazes and discussions, the sky and earth twisted. Two wisps of black fog appeared abruptly and turned into Chun Chong and Bai Su in the field. The two of them appeared in the field at the same time and immediately glared at each other. Their return attracted the attention of the people around them. It also attracted the attention of Windstream, tribes Jing Nan and Mo Sang, who were far away in the field. "Chun Chong is a good child." Mo Sang smiled and spoke. "He's still lacking compared to your Su Ming." Jing Nan's expression was still calm, but in his heart, he had long since been shocked. He may have expected this, but he did not expect Su Ming to surpass his medical skills and reach this stage. Mo Sang, "Leave Su Ming to me." Jing Nan turned his head and looked at Mo Sang as he spoke seriously. "Let's continue watching. It won't be too late to talk later." Mo Su smiled. At that moment, cries of surprise rose abruptly. As one of the people in the field shouted, everyone noticed a drastic change in the situation. Mo Su is finally moving. This is the final battle. Black fog filled the mountain. Su Ming stood on the 781st step. His eyes opened abruptly, and a bright light flashed briefly in his eyes. There were only 2 blood veins left on his body. Chapter 68. When it comes to fine control, the further I go, the more difficult it becomes. The limit of the 781st step is when I have 2 blood veins left. These 2 blood veins seem to be stuck together. I can't make them disappear, Su Ming mumbled softly. But this is already the last number. This mountain can be said to be the best place for training. Once I leave this place, it'll be difficult for me to find a chance like this again. Su Ming frowned slowly. 32, 79, 248, 371, 563, 781. These are the 6 numbers the Elder told me. This should also be the secret the Elder discovered in the past, but perhaps there's one or a few more places like this above the 781st step that even the Elder didn't discover. Determination gradually appeared in Su Ming's eyes. After a moment of silence, Su Ming looked at the plate in his hand and saw his name on it. That name made him excited. It made the qi in his body circulate. Second, Su Ming averted his gaze from the plate and lowered his head. When he finally calmed down from his excitement, a contemplative look appeared in his eyes. I've already fulfilled my wish. Now, I can give up, Su Ming mumbled. There was hesitation on his face. But if I give up, then the training of fine control will be stuck at the final stage. I won't be able to reach completion. There must be another step above where the power of balance exists. Su Ming did not hesitate for too long. He did not want to give up on this chance. He knew the danger the tribe faced. He could feel the Elder's worry. He wanted to become stronger. I can't miss this chance. I have to find that step that even the elder didn't discover. The hesitation on Su Ming's face immediately turned into determination and resolution. He lifted his foot and walked towards the 782nd step. The moment his foot landed, Su Ming's body trembled. The immense pressure came crashing down on him, causing him to tremble. A large amount of blood veins appeared on his body. The light from the blood veins spread out in all directions. It was as if they were resonating with the darkening moon in the sky, causing Su Ming to growl and move forward with gritted teeth. 783, 784, 785. When he reached 796, Su Ming's hair was a mess and his entire body was trembling as if he was convulsing. Each step he took practically required all his strength. His body was in intense pain, and he looked as if he was about to break down under the pressure. This feeling of breaking down was completely different from the burning of his blood. The burning of blood was an eruption from within, as if the body could not contain it. Yet now, it was pressing down on Su Ming's body from the outside, as if it wanted to crush his body. The blood veins in his body continued to fight back as his qi and blood circulated. It was as if they were supporting his body, preventing it from shattering. Under the nourishment of the moonlight, his body was able to withstand a bit more pressure. With each step Su Ming took, blood trickled down the corners of his mouth. A ferocious look appeared on his face, but within that ferocious look was a shocking determination and determination. I must find that staircase. I want to reach perfection in minute subtlety. Su Ming took another step and landed on the 799th step. At that moment, his vision became blurry. It was as if he could no longer take that step no matter what. The current Yi Wang was also in a sorry state. He was panting heavily. His hair was in a mess. Veins popped out on his face, and blood vessels surged all over his body as he struggled to walk to the 837th step. He felt a dull pain in his chest, and his rapidly beating heart caused him to feel dizzy. However, when he glanced at the token, his eyes were filled with madness. Mo Su! Yi Wang lifted his head abruptly and let out a low growl towards the sky. He lifted his feet and took another step forward, but his speed had clearly slowed down. Su Ming tried 5 times, but he could not lift his feet. It was as if there was a pair of giant hands pressing down on his body, causing his entire body to be in intense pain. It was as if his bones were about to shatter, and he could not lift his feet. The invisible hands were merciless and cold. They pressed down on Su Ming, causing him to be unable to stand up straight. His body slowly bent down, causing him to be unable to continue standing. He was slowly falling down. Su Ming's face was ghastly pale. Sweat continued pouring down his body. The dizziness became stronger, and a sense of helplessness grew within his heart. He struggled to lift his head slightly and looked at the dim moon in the sky. He looked at the vast sky. "Why do you weep? Oh heavens!" Those words echoed faintly in his head, and he suddenly smiled. That smile affected his entire body, causing him to feel even more pain. However, the blood-red moon in Su Ming's eyes became even clearer, and a thick wave of flames erupted forth from within. "I can't accept this." Su Ming lifted his head and let out a loud roar. His roar echoed in the air. It was the source of his anger. As he roared, Su Ming struggled to lift his right hand and bit through it once again. There was madness in his eyes, and he smeared his left pupil once again. The moment he smeared his pupil, the entire mountain trembled. The fog tumbled and waves of aura erupted from the entire Windstream Mountain. It was like a tidal wave that surged towards Su Ming from all directions. At that moment, the roar of a wild beast came from the top of the mountain. That roar seemed like an illusion as it echoed in the mountain and entered Su Ming's and Yi Wang's minds. Su Ming coughed out a mouthful of blood. As the strange aura surged into his body, banging sounds immediately reverberated in the air. As the blood veins increased once again, Su Ming roared and his bent body slowly straightened. He withstood the pressure from the invisible hands and slowly stood up. The pressure from the hands seemed to be unable to suppress Su Ming, who had the aura fused into his body. It could not suppress the burning blood fire under the moonlight. Su Ming stood up. It was dawn in the sky, and the originally dim moon seemed to let out its final light for the night at that moment. It suddenly became clear, and as Su Ming stood up slowly, he took a swift step forward. Once he reached the 800th step, he took a few more steps forward. 802, 805, 811, 814, 817. When he stood on the 817th step, Su Ming's eyes were bloodshot. The blood in his body also felt as if it was burning. He was halfway through the third burning of blood. The blood he smeared on his left eye had only dyed half of his pupil. An explosive force erupted from within his body, and his body looked as if it was about to explode. Su Ming knew that if he was in the outside world, he would definitely not be able to withstand the third burning of his blood forcefully. However, in the mountain, the powerful pressure that gathered in the world outside was actually helping him. With his body as the center, one of them was an explosive force, and the other was an oppressive force, causing a chance for him to appear when he was unable to perform the third burning of his blood. Su Ming's right index finger trembled, and as he roared, he swiped it across the entire pupil of his left eye. At that moment, he smeared his entire left pupil with blood. The burning of blood. The mountain trembled. Even more strange aura surged madly towards Su Ming from all the pores on his body and from every part of his body, causing the blood veins on his body to increase rapidly. "I'm going up." Su Ming lifted his foot and walked up once again. 819, 823, 827. When he reached the 839th step, blood mist gushed out of his body, but his eyes were still filled with determination and determination. He did not find the balance he was looking for in the steps he walked up, but Su Ming believed that it would definitely exist on the remaining steps. Mo Su. Yuan was also going mad. He was now standing on the 845th step and looking at the 839th, behind Mo Su's name on the plate. How could he not go mad? As the most outstanding person among his generation, his pride would not allow anyone to surpass him. His pride would also make him want to maintain his status as the strongest no matter what the cost. Veins popped up on his face, and his eyes were bloodshot. The proud and aloof look was no longer there, but had turned into a ferocious and unwilling look. He struggled to lift his right hand, and with a low growl, he slammed it against his chest. Immediately, a huge force surged into his body and rushed into every single part of his flesh and bones. At the same time, a blood-red mark also appeared on his chest. It was a horn, a blood-red horn, the horn of a beast the color of blood. That horn was a totem. Its color was not bright red, but rather dull. As Yi Wang's palm landed on the horn, a piercing red light immediately burst forth from the horn as if it was melting. Once the red light fused into Yi Wang's entire body, it was as if he had obtained new power. He lifted his foot and rushed forward. 845, 846. When he stood on the 861st step, Yi Wang spat out a mouthful of blood. The red light on the horn on his chest dissipated, and its original color became even dimmer, as if it was about to disappear. Mo Su, you can be proud now. You're the only one who forced me to use the Berserker mark forcefully drawn on me using the 37 drops of Berserker blood from the young master of the Berserker tribe, so that it would be easier for me to absorb it slowly and increase the possibility of me reaching the Transcendence realm. I originally didn't want to use this power forcefully. It's not beneficial to me. It's better for me to absorb it slowly. Mo Su, you can be proud now. Yi Wang gritted his teeth. As he panted, he lowered his head and looked at the plate. The moment he looked at it, his eyes widened. That's impossible. The number of steps behind Mo Su's name on the plate was rapidly increasing. 841, 843, 845, 849, until the number became 859 before Yi Wang's eyes. He was only 2 steps away from where he was. Not only did Yi Wang's forceful absorption of his Berserker blood not widen the distance between them, The distance between them had become so close. If he had not absorbed the berserker blood resolutely, then he would have been surpassed by now. That's impossible. Disbelief and shock appeared in Yi Wang's eyes. As he mumbled, he lifted his right hand once again, and with a hint of ruthlessness and madness, he pressed his palm against the dull horn on his chest. He coughed out a mouthful of blood, but a blood-red light that surged into the sky erupted from Yi Wang's entire body. Within that blood-red light, only a faint outline of his body could be seen. M.O. Sue. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.